I matched with this guy on Tinder a few years back. Let's call him Mark. I was 28 at the time and he said he was 35. We went on 3 dates, all out in public, and honestly, things were looking pretty solid. He was kind of awkward in a quirky, dorky way, but I found it charming. Our first 2 dates were for drinks at local bars, and for the third, we went bowling, which was way more fun than I expected. After that, he invited me over to his place for dinner. I already knew he had a roommate. He'd mentioned it in passing a couple of times. I thought it was a little odd that someone his age still had a roommate. But hey, I live in Ravenhill, where rent is borderline criminal. Totally understandable. According to Mark, his roommate Jordan was an old buddy from college, and they'd lived together on and off over the years. He had also mentioned, pretty casually, that things between them had been kind of tense lately. So the night came. I drove over to the address he gave me, a decent little house tucked into a quiet neighborhood. It was a single-story duplex, nothing fancy but not sketchy either. I parked out on the curb because the driveway was already full. I remember my hands being a little sweaty as I rang the doorbell. Nervous, but the good kind. Mark opened the door with this big, goofy grin on his face. I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was zero effort on decor. Like if you told me they had just moved in yesterday, I'd believe it. It had that classic grown men who don't care vibe. Huge flat screen, leather couch, one lonely recliner. Not a single picture or piece of art on the walls. I remember thinking, you're 35, my dude. Time to graduate from freshman year dorm aesthetic. He took me to the kitchen where dinner was half done already. I jumped in to help. Nothing fancy, just pasta and some kind of jarred sauce situation. While it simmered, we chilled on the couch and talked a bit. That's when I heard it. A loud, heavy thump coming from the hallway. It was sharp and kind of alarming. I turned to Mark and asked, "What was that?" He just kind of shrugged and said, "Not sure," then stood up and went to check it out. I figured Jordan was probably home, so maybe he dropped something. But a minute later, I started hearing raised voices, like full-on yelling. Not screaming, but definitely a fight brewing. I sat there awkwardly, trying not to eavesdrop too hard, but it was impossible to ignore. Mark eventually came back looking kind of embarrassed. He apologized and mumbled something about how he and Jordan had been having some disagreements and that he was hoping tonight would be chill. I told him it was all right. Honestly, I was still kind of curious where the night would go. We ate dinner at the kitchen table, but the vibe had definitely shifted. The conversation felt super forced, and Mark kept fidgeting like he was stuck in his head. I figured the blow-up with his roommate was messing with him. Then, from down the hall, I heard a door creak open. Suddenly, I heard heavy footsteps stomping toward us like someone was intentionally trying to make a scene. And boom. There was Jordan, standing in the kitchen doorway, already mid-scream, going off on Mark. The second-hand embarrassment hit me like a truck. I sat there frozen, awkwardly gripping my water glass like it could somehow make me invisible. They argued right there in front of me like I didn't even exist. Jordan stood over Mark, who hadn't even gotten up from his seat yet. At one point, Mark tried to rise, maybe to de-escalate or maybe to square up, who knows. But Jordan shoved him hard and sent him straight back down. Then Mark, in this wild snap of motion, grabbed the steak knife from beside his plate and lifted it in Jordan's direction. Jordan flinched back and snarled, "What? You gonna stab me now? Seriously?" But Mark didn't lower the knife. Instead, he stood up again and moved toward him, knife raised, not flailing, just holding it up, but still, it was terrifying. Jordan backed up, hands half raised like he couldn't believe what was happening, and ended up pinned against the wall. I still thought maybe it was just bluster, like maybe Mark was trying to scare him. But then they both crashed to the ground. Mark landed on top. I couldn't see exactly what was going on from my angle, but I definitely saw a flash of red. Someone was bleeding. My stomach dropped. I was 90% sure Jordan had been cut during the scuffle, even though it didn't seem deliberate. But still, my freaking date had just stabbed his roommate. In front of me, at the dinner table. I didn't even have time to process it. All I knew was I had to get the hell out of there. I stood up slowly and made for the door. As I passed by them, I glanced down and saw Jordan clutching his arm. Blood smeared but not pouring. Didn't look life-threatening, but still very real. I was so done. I reached the entryway, slipped my shoes on as fast as humanly possible. And there was Mark, standing between me and the front door, knife still in hand, blood and all. He tried to talk, said something like, "Wait, just stay. It's okay now." Like we could go back to sipping wine after what just happened. I didn't respond. I just pushed past him and walked straight out. Outside, my hands were trembling so bad, I dropped my keys trying to unlock my car. I could hear footsteps behind me and just about lost it. Mark was trying to catch up, calling my name, and then he actually reached for my arm. I yanked it away and dove into the car like it was a life raft, slammed the lock, and started the engine with adrenaline shaking through my whole body. I peeled out of that neighborhood without even checking my mirrors. As I drove, I couldn't stop asking myself, do I call the cops? Report it? But the more I thought about it, the more I felt like both of those guys were out of their minds. If Jordan wanted to call the police, fine. But I was done. I wanted zero part in whatever toxic mess was going on between them. And no joke. 3 days later, Mark actually messaged me asking when we could hang out again. Like nothing happened. Like I didn't see him literally pull a knife on someone. I didn't respond. I just stared at my phone, completely stunned that he could possibly think I'd say yes. Maybe some people are into the whole bad boy thing, but nah. If a guy can stab his best friend, I'm not waiting around to find out what else he's capable of. So, this all happened around the time Tinder first got really popular. Maybe 2015 or 2016? I was in my mid-20s, living in a small apartment in Rockford, Illinois, and honestly just bored out of my mind. I'd heard everyone say Tinder was basically just for hookups, but I figured, hey, why not see what happens? I'd never actually been in anything close to a serious relationship before, so I was pretty open to whatever. I remember setting up my profile and not really expecting much. I mean, I'm not especially tall, and I've got a kind of average face. Though my aunt once told me I have nice eyes, so there's that. But somehow, I started getting matches. A bunch of them. Like, a crazy amount for someone who barely knew how to take a decent selfie. It felt like dumb luck. Over the next couple weeks, I went on a few dates. Nothing wild, just coffee here, drinks there. Most of the people I met were fine, normal, polite, but no spark. Then I matched with someone named Casey. She was 28, doing her grad program in special education at a local university, and just different in a good way. We clicked almost right away. Our first few dates were pretty chill. Grabbed beers at a dive bar downtown. Shared a pizza at this old-school joint near her place. Date 4 was at my apartment. I made pasta. Okay, it was boxed spaghetti, but I added garlic bread so it felt fancy. And we just talked for hours. I wasn't getting any weird vibes, which is saying something because my radar is usually way off. What really made me feel like this was going somewhere was when she suggested we both delete Tinder. Neither of us said we were exclusive, but it felt like a pretty big step. I tried not to make a big deal about it at the time, but inside I was genuinely excited. She was sharp, funny in a low-key way, and we had a bunch in common. We were both into running, and she even mentioned doing a 10K together sometime. It felt easy, natural. I hadn't really felt that before with anyone. Then about a month into seeing each other, Casey invited me to a house party her friend was throwing. I was down. It sounded like a good chance to meet more of her people and kind of see what her world looked like. The party was out in Glendale, which was a hike from where we both lived in East Point. We caught a city bus that took us most of the way, then grabbed an Uber for the rest. Definitely better than doing the whole thing on public transport. Would have taken forever with all the transfers. When we got there, I could tell pretty quick that everyone already knew each other. I was the obvious new guy. I hung back at first, trying not to be awkward. That lasted about 30 minutes. Then I had a couple rum and cokes and loosened up. By around 10:30, I was actually having a good time chatting with a few of the guys, cracking dumb jokes. At some point, I ended up talking to this dude named Jonah. He was chill, kind of nerdy, but in a charming way. We talked about music, the garbage weather we'd been having, our jobs, just casual stuff. Mid-convo, he casually mentions that he and Casey went to school together, which didn't surprise me. Then out of nowhere he says, "You seem solid, so I'll just say this. Casey's kinda intense." Not in a bad way, but like intense. I laughed, thinking he was being dramatic. Like, what does that even mean? But he kind of raised his eyebrows like, "Yeah, just wait." I still brushed it off. Up to that point, Casey had seemed totally normal to me. Jonah didn't break eye contact when he said it, which threw me off. I stopped chuckling and kind of just stood there, frozen, awkwardly nursing the rest of my drink. The silence that followed stretched way too long, and neither of us knew how to end it. Thankfully, someone else, maybe Mason or Corey, I can't remember, walked over and started talking about fantasy football or something equally pointless, which saved us both from the weird energy. I thought about asking Jonah to explain more, but the moment had passed, and honestly, I didn't want to seem paranoid. So I let it go. Casey and I left the party a little after midnight. She was buzzing from the drinks and laughing at nothing in particular, and I remember thinking how fun she was when she was like that. We kept dating after that night, and for a while, everything felt good. We'd grab sushi after work, hit up random farmers markets on weekends, and started this thing where we'd each pick one neighborhood a month to explore. Just walk around, take pictures, try new food spots. She was vibrant and always had ideas, which helped pull me out of my rut. Whatever Jonah had said kind of melted away. I honestly forgot it even happened. But after maybe 5 or 6 more weeks, little cracks started showing. It began with minor stuff. If I took a bit too long to reply to her messages, I'd get 5 more in a row, all increasingly impatient. Once, I showed up 15 minutes late to brunch because of traffic, and she was visibly upset the entire meal, like I'd stood her up for hours. I chalked it up to her being the kind of person who just really values time or whatever. You know, trying to stay optimistic. Then one night, I had to cancel our dinner plans because one of my coworkers called out sick and I had to cover the shift. I texted her while rushing out the door. No joke, she went full radio silence for 3 days. Then when she finally reached out, it was this storm of pissed-off texts and guilt-trippy messages like, "Don't even bother explaining, I already know where your priorities are." I still stuck around. I'm not proud of it, but part of me wanted to prove I could make it work. I kept remembering the good parts. Her laugh, the way she'd randomly bring me snacks from the gas station, just because. Her quirky playlists she'd force me to listen to in the car. But it got harder and harder to ignore the rest. She started popping up at my place without warning. At first, I thought it was cute. She'd knock on my door late at night with some excuse like she just had to see me. Then it turned into full-on late-night visits where she'd refuse to leave even if I said I was tired. The vibe shifted. Something about it felt off. But again, I told myself maybe she just loved hard. Maybe I just wasn't used to being wanted that much. One night, though, things spiraled. She'd come over like she usually did after work. I don't even remember what started the fight. Something ridiculous like me not noticing her new nail polish or commenting on her Instagram post too late. But it exploded. She started yelling, loud, and wouldn't let up. Her voice cracked from shouting, and she started making these guttural, weird growling sounds that felt more horror movie than human. I legit thought she was joking, like doing some bit to make the argument ridiculous. But she wasn't. Then, without warning, she flipped. Like, flipped. 1 second it was yelling. The next, she was teary-eyed, whispering apologies and reaching for my hand like nothing had happened. I sat there totally stunned, brain fried. I didn't know what to think. At that point, Casey was my first real relationship, and I didn't have any experience to compare this with. I told myself relationships probably had these kinds of moments, that it was just passion or whatever, but things only got worse from there. She started calling constantly, like actual phone calls, not texts, and if I didn't pick up, she'd leave these frantic voicemails that swung from angry to crying to threatening to just come find me. At first it was just annoying, but then she started showing up at my job. I worked the front desk at a gym, so it wasn't exactly private. She came in during peak hours, demanding to talk, creating scenes loud enough that even the regulars would stop their reps and look over. I had to pretend she was just having a rough week. Eventually, one night she was supposed to sleep over, and we got into yet another blowout argument. My brain was fried, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I told her I needed space. I said I wanted to be alone that night. That completely set her off. She started pacing around my apartment, yelling that I was abandoning her, that I'd never loved her anyway, and, this one caught me off guard, that I was probably hooking up with someone else. Which, for the record, couldn't have been further from the truth. I was just trying to avoid another 4-hour fight over nothing. But logic didn't matter at that point. Eventually, after what felt like an endless cycle of her crying, shouting, and accusing, I managed to convince her to go home. I lived in a garden-level unit at the time, technically a basement, but it had those weird half windows near the ceiling. I walked her out. She was still sobbing, mumbling about how I was throwing away something real. I shut the door behind her and just stood there for a second. It was only 11 p.m., but I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I crashed on my bed fully clothed. A few hours later, had to be around 3:30 a.m., I was jolted awake by this loud, frantic banging. Not knocking, full-on fists slamming the door. My heart dropped. I got up slowly and peered through the peephole, and there she was. Casey. Makeup smeared, hoodie on backward, crying so hard she was gasping for breath. I cracked the door open, and she immediately started apologizing, saying she couldn't sleep, that she didn't want to lose me. I was so tired, emotionally wrecked, and stupidly trying to be the calm one, so I let her in. We sat on my old corduroy couch in the living room. I tried to reassure her, saying we could talk tomorrow when we were both rested. She was curled up on one side, sort of rocking herself, and I thought maybe she was winding down. I got up to use the bathroom, and when I came back and sat down again, everything shifted in the weirdest, most terrifying way. She reached behind her and suddenly pulled out a knife. I didn't even register what it was at first, just saw the glint of metal. And then, before I could react, she lunged forward and stabbed me right in the stomach. I didn't feel pain at first. It was like my body hadn't caught up with what just happened. I just looked at her, completely stunned, while blood started soaking into my t-shirt. Seconds later, the dizziness hit me like a wave. My ears were ringing, and I knew I was about to black out. Somehow, pure instinct kicked in, and I managed to knock the knife out of her hand. As soon as I did, she bolted, just ran out of the apartment like nothing happened. I staggered toward my phone, barely able to stay upright. Every few seconds, my vision would tunnel, and I thought, if I pass out now, that's it. Game over. I was crawling on the floor trying to find my phone, slipping on my own blood. Finally got it, somehow unlocked it with shaky hands, and called 911. I don't even remember what I said, just that I'd been stabbed and where I lived. That was the last thing I remember before waking up in the hospital. They told me later that the EMTs got there just in time. I'd lost a lot of blood, but they were able to stabilize me on the way to the ER. Honestly, I owe those paramedics my life. After I came to, the police visited me, and I gave them the whole story. Casey didn't run far. They picked her up not long after she left my place, and apparently she didn't even try to deny anything. Just sat there in the back of the squad car saying, I had to. In the days that followed, I heard more than I ever wanted to about her situation. A few of her friends and one of her cousins reached out, filling in the blanks. Turns out Casey had been struggling with severe mental health issues for a while. Her parents eventually called me too, and that conversation was heavy. They were heartbroken, apologetic, confused. Said they knew she'd had problems but thought she was getting better, that the meds were helping. They sounded like good people, completely blindsided. That's when Jonah's random comment at that party hit me like a freight train. I'd brushed it off like a dumb joke, but now I realized he must have seen the signs way before I ever could. In the weeks after I got out of the hospital, I made some serious changes. New locks, new phone number, deleted every trace of her from my life. It wasn't easy, and for a while, I couldn't even sleep without double-checking that all my doors were locked 3 times. But eventually, I felt okay again. I've moved forward since then. It took a while, but I got there. And as weird as it sounds, I really do hope she gets the help she needs. I just never want to be a part of that process again. A while back, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was messing around on some dating apps, mostly out of boredom. I wasn't having much luck, honestly. Barely got any matches, but I wasn't stressing about it too much. I had a lot going on with work and other stuff, so dating wasn't really my priority. I figured, if something happened, cool. If not, whatever. Then one week I matched with this woman named Casey on Tinder. She was witty as hell, and our chats actually flowed, which was rare for me. After a few days of joking around and sharing weird memes, she floated the idea of grabbing a coffee that Saturday. I was totally down. She picked a cafe in a neighborhood I didn't really know well. Said we could walk through the park nearby after. Sounded decent, so I agreed. Now I'd never been to that side of Elmford before. It's kind of infamous. People say the east side is sketchy. Lots of run-down buildings, bad rep from years ago. But recently they'd been putting up new apartment complexes and trying to rebrand it, I guess. Gentrification in progress kind of vibe. When I Googled the spot she mentioned, I had a moment of hesitation. The street looked a little grimy. But I was more curious about her than anything, so I figured I'd roll with it. We kept texting a bit throughout the week. Not constantly, but enough to keep the vibe going. By the time Saturday rolled around, I was buzzing with a mix of nerves and excitement. I don't go on dates often, and when I do, I always get this weird jittery energy. I showed up about 15 minutes early to the cafe, ordered a cappuccino, and snagged a seat on the patio. It was one of those setups where the seating spilled out right next to the sidewalk. Pretty chill place, actually. Had fairy lights strung up and everything. I sat where I had a clear view of the street, so I'd spot her as soon as she came up. And right on cue, she appeared. Casey looked just like her pics, maybe even better in person. She had this super casual confidence in the way she walked. I liked that. Only thing was, it was kind of late for a first coffee date. Like, almost 8 p.m., and the place was already prepping to close. But neither of us wanted to end things right there, so we went ahead with her original idea and started walking toward the park. As we crossed the street, I started feeling a little on edge. That part of Elmford didn't exactly scream safe after dark. But I didn't want to come off like a paranoid weirdo, so I kept my mouth shut and tried to play it cool. To my surprise, the park was actually kind of nice at night. The city must have done some renovations. There were streetlights lining the paved paths and benches that didn't look like they'd been vandalized into oblivion. We strolled and talked about everything. Work, pets, old vacations. There were still some people milling around near the entrance, walking dogs or jogging. But the farther we went, the thinner the crowd got. Eventually, the pavement turned to gravel, and the lights started getting sparse. That's when my gut started acting up. You know that feeling when something's just off? I mentioned maybe turning back, gently, trying not to kill the vibe. But Casey was all, "Come on, I want to check out that big tree area at the far end. It looks so cool in the dark." She seemed excited, and I didn't want to be the buzzkill, so I agreed, even though my internal alarms were quietly screaming. We kept going. The path was nearly empty. To our right was a dense patch of trees, and on the left, a wide, open stretch of field that was totally dark. The last lamppost we passed was way behind us at that point. I was starting to regret not speaking up more firmly. Then it happened. Two guys came out of the shadows like they'd just stepped through a portal. Both had hoodies pulled up, and one of them had a knife, like a legit gleaming blade. "Give us your phones and wallets," the taller one said. His voice was low and weirdly theatrical, like he was trying to sound menacing on purpose. I froze. It hit me like a gut punch. I'd never been mugged before, never even been in a situation like that. My brain was in full panic mode, but my mouth moved before I even thought. I remember stepping a bit in front of Casey and telling her, as calmly as I could manage, to stay still and just do what they said. I reached into my jacket pocket, trying not to let my hands tremble too much, and slowly handed over my wallet and phone. Casey did the same, no hesitation. The two guys snatched everything and took off running, vanishing into the trees like they'd done this before. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. It felt like the entire park went silent. My legs were locked in place, my fingers were twitching, and I could barely breathe. It felt like my heart was trying to leap out of my throat. I turned to look at Casey, and she was just chill. Like way calmer than I expected anyone to be after something like that. At the time, I figured maybe she'd been through worse before or just had nerves of steel. I, on the other hand, was barely holding it together. I desperately wanted to call the cops, but we were phoneless in the middle of a shadowy park. We speed-walked back toward the cafe, but of course, it had already locked up for the night. Just our luck. Thankfully, there was a 24-hour corner store right next to it. One of those places that sells everything from cat food to phone chargers. We ducked in, explained what happened, and asked them to call the police. The cashier looked annoyed at first, but after hearing knife, he got on the phone right away. When the cops showed up, Casey did most of the talking. She laid everything out while I stood behind her, trying to get my breathing back under control. I was still in panic mode. It felt so surreal, like I was stuck in a low-budget crime show, except I was the background character who got mugged in episode 1. The cops were nice enough, but didn't seem overly optimistic about catching the guys. They said something about the lack of clear descriptions and no surveillance in that part of the park. They gave us a ride home after taking down our info. By the time I got to my apartment, it was almost midnight. I'd calmed down enough to think rationally again. That's when I remembered Tinder had a desktop version, so I grabbed my laptop and logged in, just kind of hoping Casey might try to message me. Long shot, I know, but we'd just been through something traumatic together. Felt like a bonding moment, you know? Instead, the first thing I noticed was that she'd already unmatched me. No profile, no chats, just gone. I sat there staring at the screen, completely confused. Like, how? Her phone was stolen too. How would she even have access to her account that fast? The more I thought about it, the more things started feeling off. She picked the place. She was the one who insisted we go deeper into the park, even when I wanted to turn around. And she didn't flinch during the mugging. It was like she expected it. At the time, I told myself I was overthinking, but all those little red flags just wouldn't stop piling up in my head. I didn't call the cops to share my suspicions. Honestly, what would I even say? Hey, I think the girl I went on one date with might have helped set up a robbery, but I've got zero proof except a gut feeling. Yeah, that wasn't gonna go anywhere. Still, the weirdest part came months later. I was back on the apps, still single and still getting ghosted, when I saw her again. Different profile pic, but same name, same eyes. I swiped right. Figured maybe I'd get some kind of closure or explanation. Nothing. No match. Not even a hey. This all went down around 8 or 9 years ago, back when I was in my junior year at a university in Westlake, Tennessee. I was sharing a small off-campus rental with 2 other guys who were way more into keg parties and Call of Duty than keeping the kitchen clean. That was also around the time Tinder started blowing up. People were still kinda weird about it though. Like, using an app to meet someone was still considered sketchy by a lot of folks. I was low-key embarrassed when I signed up. But honestly, I'd already struck out with every girl in my friend group, so I figured, screw it, why not give it a shot? I took a few half-decent selfies. I think one of them even had my dog in it because I read somewhere that helps, and started swiping. Right away, I noticed that most of the profiles looked super fake. Tons of model shots and famous faces. I don't think the app was great at keeping bots out back then. Might still be bad now. I don't know, I haven't touched Tinder in years. But then I matched with this girl named Lila. She said she went to my school. I was immediately suspicious because, she was definitely out of my league. But I did some light social media stalking and actually found her Facebook. Everything lined up. Same photos, same name, same school. No mutual friends. But the profile didn't scream catfish. So I let myself be cautiously optimistic. We messaged for a few days, mostly small talk with a sprinkle of flirtation. Eventually, I asked her if she wanted to grab a drink, and she agreed right away. We picked a local bar just a few blocks from where I lived. Honestly, I was shocked. I fully expected her to ghost me. The night of the date, it was drizzling, but nothing dramatic. I got there early because nerves, obviously. Was pacing a bit outside the bar when I saw her walking up. And holy crap, she looked exactly like her pictures. It felt surreal. My anxiety basically vanished on the spot. We went inside and grabbed a couple drinks. 5 minutes in, I felt like I'd known her for months. She was funny, made eye contact, wasn't glued to her phone. I stopped worrying about scams or weird setups pretty quickly. Everything felt weirdly normal. At one point, she asked if I could walk her home later, and I instantly said yes. In my head, I was like, okay, she trusts me. That's a good sign, right? But then, right as we were about to leave, my phone started buzzing non-stop. It was my mom calling, so I excused myself and picked up. Long story short, there was some stuff going on back home that needed my attention. Nothing life-threatening, just one of those family things. I told Lila I had to cut the night short and felt like a complete ass about it. I offered to order her an Uber, which she accepted, and we said our goodbyes out front. I jogged back to the house and called my mom again, handled what I could from afar. The next morning, Lila and I picked up where we left off on Tinder. Still hadn't swapped numbers yet, though. I asked for hers at one point and she dodged the question. I didn't push. It made sense if she wanted to be cautious. We made plans for another meetup the next weekend. She suggested this quiet park near downtown at 8 p.m. on Saturday. I thought it was kind of random and late for a park hang, but I was down. I mean, we clicked the first time, and I wanted to see if there was something real there. A few days later, I was chilling at home, half working on a presentation, half scrolling Reddit, when my roommate Kyle wandered into my room with a bag of fast food and a look like he'd just remembered something funny. I decided to finally tell him about Lila. I'd been keeping it quiet up to that point, mainly because I wasn't sure how real it all was. But I showed him her Tinder pics and mentioned we'd gone out for drinks and had another hangout lined up for Saturday night. To my surprise, he didn't clown on me at all. I was expecting at least some light roasting about meeting girls on Tinder, but instead, he just nodded and said something like, "She's cute. Hope it works out." Honestly, that gave me a weird little confidence boost. Anyway, Friday rolls around and Kyle tells me there's a house party happening across town. He and our other roommate, Ray, were heading out there and asked if I wanted in. I was tempted, but I had a bunch of school stuff I'd been procrastinating on and figured I'd grind through it that night so I could actually relax the rest of the weekend. So they left, and I stayed behind, headphones on, typing out something half intelligent for a media ethics class, I think. Then, maybe an hour in, my phone buzzed. It was Kyle. He sent a photo and a message. "This her?" I opened the image, and I immediately felt my stomach drop. It looked like Lila, standing in the middle of a loud-ass party, red Solo cup in hand, mid-laugh. I texted back, "Yeah, that's her." He replied almost instantly, "We'll talk later." Just those 3 words. And man, that spiraled my brain into overdrive. Was she making out with someone? Trash-talking me? Was this some awkward double life thing? I don't even know what I expected, but I couldn't concentrate for the rest of the night. The vibe in the house was so quiet, it made the clock ticking in the kitchen sound like a hammer. Around 10 p.m. I heard the front door swing open. Kyle and Ray came back, laughing about something stupid. But Kyle's mood shifted when he saw me waiting in the living room. He sobered up fast, not like fully serious, but serious enough to make my heart pound. He sat down across from me and said, "Okay, dude, you're not gonna believe this." I braced myself for some kind of hookup confession, or maybe that she'd insulted me or something petty. Instead, Kyle tells me that Lila was totally trashed at the party. She was talking to a few random guys, kind of loudly, and started bragging about how she was planning to lure some guy to a park the next night. She said something about setting up a chump, and how a few friends were going to be waiting nearby to deal with him. According to Kyle, it wasn't even subtle. She was almost proud of it. He said it clicked when she mentioned the park and the time, so he snapped a photo and sent it my way just to be sure. When I tell you I just sat there, jaw slack, not knowing how to respond, I mean it. For a second, I wondered if she was just joking around, like drunk people sometimes do. But who jokes like that? especially in public, loud and laughing. I opened Tinder just to check, and sure enough, she'd messaged earlier. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I locked my phone without replying. My gut was in knots, but weirdly enough, I wasn't crushed or heartbroken. Just unsettled and kinda pissed. I went to bed that night with the weirdest mix of emotions: confused, relieved, grossed out. The next morning, I figured out what to do. I messaged her like normal, confirming our date. I don't even know why. Maybe just to mess with her a little. Not my proudest moment, but I wanted her to think everything was still on. I wasn't gonna show up, obviously, but something about that tiny bit of revenge felt good. There wasn't any real point calling the cops. I didn't have proof, and I doubted anyone would take it seriously. But man, I still think about what might have happened if I'd actually walked her home that first night. Did she change her mind because of the call from my mom? Or was that never the plan? I'll never know. But one thing's for sure. Dodged a serious bullet there. I'm Liv, and this happened back when I had finally decided to give Tinder a shot after being single for nearly 6 years. I was in my late 20s, living in a quiet suburb outside of Bakersfield, and my best friend had just gotten hitched to a dude she met on the app. This was around 2017, I think. I hadn't been super into the whole online dating thing before that. It felt weird, artificial. But everyone around me was meeting people that way, so eventually I caved. I wasn't expecting much when I downloaded it. I mean, I barely even knew how the app worked. I just figured it'd be fun to see what was out there. Spoiler, it wasn't fun. It was mostly weird. Like, the first guy I met showed up to our date in literal SpongeBob pajama pants. I kid you not. He strolled into this trendy rooftop bar like he had just rolled out of bed and accidentally wandered in. I choked down one drink, made up an excuse, and dipped. Another guy asked to meet at this indie cafe downtown, which I thought sounded chill, until I got there and saw him already sitting with another woman. Same booth, across from each other, drinks in hand. I literally turned on my heel and walked out before he could notice. Pretty sure he mixed us up or tried to double date. Either way, gross. Anyway, those were weird, but not scary. What I'm about to tell you? That one shook me. So, I matched with this guy named Nate. He was 30, I was 29 at the time, and we hit it off through messages. We talked music, travel, even college. And get this, we had both gone to the University of Kansas. Of course, that school's massive, so I didn't think it was that odd I didn't recognize him. I looked him up on Facebook and came up empty. But again, I just figured he was one of those people who kept things private. No big red flags at the time. We made plans to meet up at this casual sports bar called Mackey's. I wasn't thrilled about the place. It kind of gave me post-work happy hour vibes. But I appreciated that he took initiative and picked somewhere close to where I worked. It was a Tuesday night, pretty quiet when I got there. I grabbed a table near the back, sent Nate a quick message to say I'd arrived, and settled in with a cider. That's when I noticed this older guy sitting solo at the bar. Mid-50s, longish gray hair, hunched a bit. He kept turning his head to look at me every few minutes. Not like a casual glance, but like repeatedly. It gave me this gnawing feeling in my gut. Meanwhile, I was checking my phone, waiting for Nate. He sent a message saying he was 5 minutes away. Cool. I sipped my drink and tried to ignore the guy at the bar. But then Nate texted again. Traffic. 10 more minutes. Then, another update. Couldn't find parking. Okay, fine. Stuff happens. But 20 minutes in, and still nothing. The weird feeling was starting to crawl up my spine. The guy at the bar was still glancing at me, like clockwork. I watched him fiddle with his phone on the bar counter. It suddenly hit me. What if that was Nate? What if he used fake pictures and this whole thing was some weird, creepy setup? My stomach dropped. I felt frozen in place, but also hyper-aware of every move he made. I stopped replying to Nate's messages, which had become shorter and less apologetic. When he finally said, "Walking in now," I scanned the room. No one walked in. I was done. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and unmatched him before I even got to the door. As I walked past, the man at the bar turned and watched me the entire way out. Didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just stared. I didn't want to confront him. I didn't even want to know if I was right. Honestly, I still don't. He probably expected me to freak out, make a huge scene, accuse him right there in public so he could gaslight me or play the innocent old man card. But I didn't give him that satisfaction. I just kept walking, eyes forward, pretending like I hadn't even noticed him watching me like a hawk. I stepped outside and let the door close behind me without looking back. I had a friend, Mallory, who lived a few blocks away, so I shot her a quick text to see if she was around. I didn't want to go home alone. While I waited for her to reply, I started walking down Claiborne Street, heading in the general direction of her apartment. It was chilly, the kind of cold that makes your hands feel stiff even with gloves. I shoved my hands in my coat pockets and kept a decent pace. After maybe 4 or 5 minutes, I got this feeling. You know the one. Like someone was too close behind you. I turned to check, and there he was. The same guy from the bar, trailing behind me by maybe half a block. Not rushing, just following. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he lived nearby too. But with every step, my gut told me otherwise. It wasn't a coincidence. He was following me on purpose. I sped up, heart pounding, trying not to look panicked, hoping he'd lose interest. But no. He stayed on me. When I reached the intersection at Wilton and 7th, I hit the red light and had to wait. I glanced back again. He was way closer now. Like, way too close. I felt adrenaline shoot straight to my hands. I was just about to bolt across the street, didn't even care about the light, when I felt his hand clamp down on my arm. Hard. His fingers dug in like claws, and before I could even process what was happening, he was trying to yank me toward this alley between 2 closed storefronts. It was dim and narrow and reeked of something foul, and I knew, just knew, that if I let him get me in there, I wouldn't be coming back out. I screamed, like lungs on fire screamed. It was all instinct. I didn't even know I had that kind of volume in me. There weren't a ton of people around, but thankfully, a group of teenagers was loitering across the street outside a taco truck. One of them pointed and yelled something, and the whole group started moving toward me. Still, this guy wouldn't let go. His grip was like a damn vice, and I could feel his dirty nails scraping my skin. I honestly thought he was about to tear through it. I kept screaming, more desperate now, until the teens were practically in front of us. "Yo, back off!" one of the kids shouted. He looked about 16, wearing a hoodie and a backwards baseball cap. There were 4 of them, all dudes, none super big, but clearly not messing around. The guy hesitated for a second, just long enough. I yanked my arm with everything I had, and he lost his grip. He glared at all of us, didn't say a word, and then turned and stormed off in the opposite direction, disappearing down a side street like he hadn't just tried to drag someone off the sidewalk. The kid with the cap stepped up next to me and asked, "You okay?" I nodded, even though my whole body was shaking like a leaf. "I think so. Thank you. Seriously. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if you hadn't come over." I looked down at my arm. It wasn't bleeding, but it was red and raw. and I could already see deep marks forming, like angry crescents from where his nails had dug in. It throbbed like hell. The teen stayed with me, super chill and way more mature than I expected. They offered to walk me to Mallory's or call someone, but I told them I'd be all right. One of them gave me his number in case I needed a witness or anything for the police. I was so grateful. I could have cried. They waited with me while I ordered an Uber and didn't leave until I was in the car. I went straight home. Didn't even bother going to Mallory's in the end. I didn't call the cops that night either, which I know sounds ridiculous, but I was so rattled I couldn't think straight. I called my mom, sobbing, and she practically screamed at me to report it. So I did, the next morning. Somehow, the cops tracked him down within 24 hours. I never got the full story, whether the bartender recognized him, or if the bar had working cameras, or maybe his Tinder profile left some breadcrumbs. But they found him. And yep, he was the guy behind Nate's profile. It was a setup from the start. They never told me if he'd done it before, or why he targeted me. I still don't know. But the part that haunts me the most is thinking about that alley. What he might have done to me if those kids hadn't been there. So, I'm Jamie, and this whole thing went down when I was 27. It was about a year and a half ago, and yeah, I was still deep in the dating app trenches. I had Hinge and Bumble, but I'd re-downloaded Tinder on a whim. I know, not exactly known for serious connections, but I figured, why not? I've met cool people in weirder ways. One night after work, I was chilling on my couch in my tiny rental in Rockland, Michigan. TV was just background noise, and I was zoning out while lazily swiping through Tinder. Mostly nope after nope, but then this guy, Derek, popped up. His profile had actual decent photos, a miracle in itself, and he looked normal, not standing next to a tiger or holding a fish. I swiped right, and bam, we matched instantly. We started messaging right away. He had this really dry, sarcastic sense of humor that totally cracked me up. Within an hour, he asked if I wanted to meet for a drink sometime, and I figured, screw it, let's do it. I found out he lived just a few blocks from the health center where I worked, so it was super convenient. We planned to meet that Thursday. Thursday afternoon, we texted a bit while I scarfed down a protein bar during my break. Derek confirmed the place, a pub called the Hollow Goose, just a 5-minute walk from my job. After work, I changed out of my scrubs into something a little more first date, but I'm chill, and started walking over. Right as I left, he texted he was already there, which gave me those jittery butterflies and made me speed up a little. Walking in, I was low-key bracing myself for disappointment. I'd been catfished before, once by a guy who was pushing 50 when he claimed to be 32. Another time, the guy literally used photos of some male model. So yeah, expectations were low. But there he was, seated in a booth, and he actually looked like his pictures. One of them even showed him in the exact shirt he was wearing. That weirdly reassured me. He had close-cropped blonde hair, a clean-shaven face, and looked fit, like gym bro fit, but not obnoxious about it. He said he was 36, which was a bit older than the guys I usually dated, but he carried it well. I slid into the booth across from him, and we got drinks. The vibe was odd. Not terrible, but kind of lopsided. Derek was funny, sure, and clearly good at telling stories. But he didn't ask me a single thing about myself. It was like watching a one-man comedy show where I was the only audience member. Still, I was laughing, the drinks were decent, and I didn't feel like running away, which I've definitely felt before. We eventually ordered some food, nachos and wings, nothing fancy, and hung out till around 11. As we were wrapping up, I pulled out my phone to get an Uber, and he kind of casually went, "I can give you a lift." It caught me off guard because he'd mentioned earlier his place was just around the corner. But I figured, maybe he was just being polite. I agreed, thinking it was kind of sweet. We left the pub and walked a few blocks to his apartment building. He led me down into the parking garage, which was totally empty. That flicker of, "Okay, this is sketchy," popped into my head, but I pushed it down. I half expected him to suggest we go upstairs, but he didn't. Instead, we got in his car, a spotless silver hatchback, and started driving out of the garage. Right as he turned onto the main road, he looked over and asked, "So, where exactly am I taking you?" I hadn't told him my actual address. I just gave a vague idea of the neighborhood. Figured that was good enough. Once we got closer, I casually told Derek to just drop me off at this 7-Eleven on the corner. Thought I was being smart, keeping things chill without giving away where I lived. But the second the words left my mouth, he gave me this look. Eyebrows raised, lips tight. "Oh, so you don't trust me enough to know where you live?" he said, trying to sound jokey but definitely not joking. I didn't answer at first. What was I supposed to say? "Yeah. I think you might turn out to be a psycho?" Not exactly a vibe. But honestly, that was what I was thinking, even if I didn't want to admit it out loud. The silence stretched, and I could feel him getting pissed. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes had this glassy red look, like someone who'd had one too many drinks or just lost it a little. He kept glancing at me between watching the road, and my stomach was starting to knot. I tried brushing it off. "Nah, I just remembered I need to grab a couple things before heading in. That place has decent coffee." He didn't say anything, but he didn't pull into the 7-Eleven either. He just drove past it, eyes fixed straight ahead like I hadn't said a word. That's when the panic kicked in. "Can you pull over?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Nothing. He just pressed the gas a little harder. I repeated myself, louder this time. "Derek, pull the car over." Still nothing. Tears started to well up, and I could hear myself start to beg. My voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since I was a kid. He just kept driving, faster now, down a side street with no lights, no stops, nothing. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking like crazy, and unlocked it. As soon as he saw the screen light up, he lunged over the console trying to grab it. I jerked my arm away, heart pounding so loud I couldn't even think. He missed, barely, but I held onto my phone like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I turned my body to the window and dialed 911. Before I could hit the call button, Derek suddenly changed his tune. Okay, stop. Just stop. Look, I'll pull over. Just don't call the cops. Please." His voice cracked that time. Sounded desperate. I didn't trust a word of it, but I nodded like I did. "If you let me out, I won't tell anyone," I lied through my teeth. He slowed down and finally pulled up to the curb. I yanked the handle and jumped out before the car even fully stopped. My legs were jelly, but I backed away fast. He rolled the window down and started rambling some weird apology, saying he didn't mean to scare me, that it was all a misunderstanding. I nodded again, told him it was fine, just to get him to leave. I didn't mean any of it. A couple cars were building up behind him, honking, so eventually he gave up and drove off. The second his taillights vanished, I took off running. Full on sprinted the rest of the way home, heart still pounding. I locked the door behind me and immediately called the police. When the officers showed up, I told them straight up that I felt like I'd been kidnapped. Gave them Derek's full name, phone number, everything I had. The cop was polite but kind of cagey. Said they'd look into it. A few days later, I got a follow-up saying he denied everything. Since it was my word against his, they couldn't really do much. Still, I'm glad I reported it. Even if nothing happened this time, at least there's a record now. If he tries pulling this crap on someone else, maybe they'll take her seriously. Maybe that'll be enough to stop it before it gets worse. When I lost my job last spring, I downloaded Bumble just to keep my mind off things. It wasn't serious. I wasn't looking for anything deep. I just needed a distraction. A week in, I matched with a guy named Max. His profile looked like it belonged to someone from a different planet. Yachts, mountain resorts, champagne glasses held up next to helicopter windows. Every photo looked edited, but his messages didn't. He texted first. "What's your favorite movie to rewatch on a rainy day?" I smiled. We talked about dumb comedies, childhood favorites, Thai food, and how garlic naan is superior to plain. 2 days later, he sent a reservation link to a steakhouse I had only seen in articles about where celebrities eat. I thought it was a joke. He confirmed it wasn't. 8 p.m. "I'll be waiting at the bar," he wrote. I almost canceled 10 times before walking in. The place smelled like butter and polished wood. I felt like someone had dropped me into a movie. Max stood out, not because he was flashy, he wasn't, but because he looked like he belonged there. Confident, but not loud. He kissed my cheek lightly and pulled out a chair. We talked. Well, he talked. I mostly nodded. He told me about his startup, something with logistics and AI automation. I didn't understand half of it, but he kept it interesting. When he asked about me, I was honest. I'd worked in operations at a mid-sized firm, lost my job due to downsizing, had a couple of freelance gigs going, nothing steady. He didn't flinch, just said, "Everyone smart I know has been fired at least once." We met 3 more times. Each spot was more expensive than the last. A hidden sushi place behind an unmarked door, a rooftop cocktail bar with a dress code, and then a private dining room at some French place where the waiter only spoke to us in low tones. Max always paid. I offered once and he laughed, not in a mocking way, just like it was never going to happen. I started to relax into it. Maybe he was just one of those rich guys who liked spoiling people. Maybe I just got lucky. The messages between our dates were short but warm. A link to a song, a selfie from the gym, a funny meme. He wasn't pushy. If I took a while to respond, he never commented on it. I started checking my phone more often. Even told my friend about him. She asked if I'd Googled him. I hadn't. When I did, I found a few generic articles about his company and a speaking event he'd done at some tech thing in Dubai. Everything seemed real. A week after our 4th date, he sent me a text saying, "Want to do something crazy?" I replied with a laughing emoji. He followed it with a screenshot of a booking, a helicopter tour over the city, sunset slot, private, wine included. Price listed next to it. Just over 10,000. "You in?" he asked. I stared at the screen. It looked unreal. "That's insane," I wrote. He sent back a winking emoji. "Insanely fun," he said. "It's tomorrow at 6. I'll pick you up at 5. I hesitated. My stomach felt tight. "Let me think a bit," I typed. "Have a headache, Oran." "Of course," he said. "Just don't wait too long. They'll release the slot." A few hours later, I checked my email. A ticket had come through. The sender was the helicopter company, with my full name on the reservation. I hadn't entered it anywhere. It said, "Paid in full." The note section read, "Max M. Paid. Guest. My name." I checked the booking again. It was legit. The pickup location was listed too. My name was on the manifest. I texted him, "Why is the booking under my name?" He responded quickly. "It was faster that way," he wrote. "All you have to do is show ID if they ask. You can still decide if you want to go." That part made me pause. If I didn't go, would there be a penalty? Would my name be blacklisted? Did it matter? I sat for a long time just staring at the screen. The price of the ticket kept echoing in my head. $10,000, just like that. For one ride. I got up and made tea, then sat back down and opened the email again. I read the fine print. Cancellation policy. Guest responsibilities. Liability waiver. All under my name. I felt cold all over. Still, I told myself this was just how rich people lived. Fast decisions. No paperwork hassles. I told myself Max was just being efficient. That it meant nothing. That he probably booked things like this for friends all the time. But I didn't answer. I waited. That night, I messaged him. "Hey, I think I need a little pause." He called as soon as he saw the message. No greeting. His voice was tight, controlled, like we were negotiating a contract. "I want my money back," he said flatly. "All of it. You accepted services. That creates liability." I laughed, half out of nerves, half because I thought he was joking. "You're serious? If you don't return what I've spent, I'll see you in court," he said. The line went dead. That night, my phone didn't stop. First, text after text. Then screenshots of receipts. Each dinner, the wine, the tour. Every charge had a note attached. Per her request. Confirmed verbally. Guest insisted. He made it look like I had asked for everything. I blocked him, but then messages started showing up through WhatsApp, Telegram, even LinkedIn. I changed my settings, made accounts private. Still, more screenshots, more proof. He framed the narrative so neatly, I started to wonder what I had said, exactly, on those dates. By the next day, I was too nervous to go outside. I hadn't slept. I stood by my front door and listened, just to be sure. At 8 a.m., I opened the door to get groceries and almost stepped on a manila envelope. No return name. Inside was a printed version of the helicopter booking. My name in bold at the top and across the middle, in red marker. Pay. That was the moment I stopped brushing it off. That night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A man's voice, calm, casual, read off 3 addresses. My parents' home, my brother's apartment, and my best friend's place. "Should I call them next?" he asked. I didn't say a word. I hung up, grabbed my jacket, and ran to the nearest police station. The officer at the front desk listened quietly, then asked, "Do you know that Max is already flagged in our system?" He turned the monitor and showed me a list. 7 complaints. All filed within the past year. Fraud, coercion, identity misuse. Same MO, high-end dates, fake intimacy, financial traps. While I was still processing that, a notification popped up on his screen. Password reset on my email. My account. He turned the screen to me. "Did you request this?" "No." He logged the request and submitted a trace to the provider. I called my bank and froze all my cards. They told me someone had tried to use one at a jewelry store earlier that day. I stayed at my friend's place that night. Every hour, I checked the windows. Every shadow made me flinch. A week later, the detective handling my case called. They'd picked Max up. Not for my complaint, but for a separate case filed by a woman in another city. Her story sounded almost identical. They connected the dots. I went in to give my full statement, handed over every message, every screenshot, and the envelope. The detective was blunt. Max had used variations of his real name. He wasn't rich. He took out loans in his dates' names, sometimes using personal info they'd given him during dates. The expensive outings? He paid with money pulled from short-term credit scams and cards opened under aliases. The helicopter booking had been real, paid using a card that didn't belong to him. My name on the reservation wasn't romantic. It was bait. If anything had gone wrong, I'd be the one answering for it. They issued a protective order the same day. Court was scheduled in 2 months. Until then, I was told to stay alert, keep records, and not respond to anything that came through, no matter how harmless it looked. I deleted every app, changed every password. I started carrying cash and going only to places I knew. No more hidden rooftop lounges, no private chefs. I'd drink cheap coffee in paper cups and sit facing the door. Every time my phone buzzes, I jump. If something feels too generous, too fast, too easy, it usually isn't. You always pay for it. Sometimes the cost is just money. Other times, it's your safety. When I was 25 and working night shifts at the hospital, I barely saw people outside of patients and coworkers. My days started at 5 p.m. and ended at 7 in the morning, so normal dating or hanging out didn't really fit my schedule. I downloaded Bumble more out of boredom than anything else. It felt like an easy way to remind myself that life existed beyond the fluorescent lights and beeping monitors. That's where I matched with Brandon. He looked normal enough in his pictures. Jeans, dog, smile that didn't seem forced. His messages were casual and funny. He made a joke about how corporate life was slowly killing his will to live, and I replied that at least his office probably didn't smell like antiseptic and body odor. After 2 days of messaging, he asked if I wanted to come by and hang out before one of my shifts. Watch something, eat something. I didn't feel like putting on real clothes and pretending to be social in public, so I said sure. He lived in a small single-story house not far from the hospital. It was tucked into a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy but clean. Small front yard, porch light already on when I arrived. The street was lined with trees that made the area feel kind of hidden. I texted him that I was outside, and he opened the door before I even stepped out of my car. Inside was warm and smelled like incense, or maybe a plug-in air freshener. The lights were dim. He pointed toward the couch while apologizing for the mess, though everything looked fine to me. We ordered Chinese food before I even sat down. He knew a place nearby that delivered fast. I kicked off my sneakers and curled up on the corner of the couch. The carpet was soft, kind of worn down in places but clean. A flat screen was already queued up with a comedy series, something familiar that I'd seen before, easy background noise. He talked about his dog that passed last year, a golden retriever named Max. Said Max used to bark at the vacuum like it was a personal enemy and could open doors with his nose. The conversation was easy, which surprised me. Most first meets are awkward, but this wasn't. The food came fast, and we ate off paper plates. I liked that he didn't try anything, didn't sit too close or act weird. He laughed at the dumb parts of the show. I noticed the room had no windows, or if there were, they were covered by blackout curtains drawn tight. The lamp in the corner gave off a yellowish hue, making everything feel kind of soft around the edges. About an hour in, just after I put my plate on the coffee table and leaned back into the couch, we both heard it. A sharp, metallic sound from below, like a pipe getting hit. It wasn't loud enough to echo, but it was distinct and out of place. I sat up a little, and he looked over and grinned. "Old heating system," he said. "Makes weird noises sometimes." I nodded, even though it didn't really sound like heating. It reminded me of my parents' basement back home, where the water heater used to ping when it expanded. Still, it was an old house. I didn't say anything. We went back to the show, but maybe 5 minutes later, the noise came again, longer this time. It didn't sound like a ping or a rattle. It was a rhythmic metal-on-metal sound, like something tapping a pipe in sequence. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap, tap. Brandon paused the show and stood up. "Probably the valve," he said. "It sticks sometimes." He stretched his arms over his head like it was nothing and turned toward a door off the kitchen that I hadn't noticed before. "I'll check it," he said. "Just stay here. Basement stairs are steep. Don't want you tripping." He disappeared through the door. I stayed on the couch, pulling my knees up and wrapping the throw blanket around me even though I wasn't cold. The show was paused on a frame of someone mid-sentence. I stared at it without really seeing it, listening. I didn't hear anything at first. No creaks, no footsteps, no more tapping. The only sound was the low hum of the fridge behind the kitchen wall. A few minutes passed. I looked at my phone. No signal, which wasn't weird. I'd had dead zones in old buildings before. I opened the Bumble app out of habit, but it spun without loading. I closed it. Then I heard him coming back up. His footsteps were heavy, maybe because of the steep stairs. He walked back into the room holding 2 glasses, both filled with Coke. He handed one to me and sat down again, clicking play on the remote. "All good," he said. "Just the pressure buildup." I turned the release valve. I nodded and took a sip, even though I wasn't really thirsty. The carbonation hit my tongue sharp and cold. I told myself I was just jittery because of the night shift routine. I'd slept badly that day. My brain was foggy. The house was just old. Things creak, pipes knock. I wasn't used to being in someone else's space. That was all. He kept his eyes on the screen, like nothing had happened. By midnight, I stood up and said I should head out. I had to change and get to work by 2 a.m. He looked disappointed but didn't argue. Just as I was slipping my sneakers back on, that metal sound came again, this time louder and sharper, like something striking a pipe with more force. Not a ping, not random. It sounded angry. I looked toward the basement door. Something moved behind it. The shadow was quick but clear, just enough for me to know it wasn't my imagination. A horizontal shift, like someone pacing, or maybe trying to get close to the crack of the door. Brandon turned his head too, then chuckled. "Rats," he said, brushing it off. "Big ones. Probably freaked out when I turned on the boiler earlier." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. His jaw was tight. I could see the muscles twitch. I nodded slowly, trying not to stare at the door too long. My mouth was dry. "Early shift," I said, grabbing my coat. "If I don't clock in on time, they dock my pay." "You can crash here," he offered. "Couch is comfy. You don't have to drive this late." I shook my head. They really track our hours now. Got in trouble last month. I kept walking, putting my phone in my pocket, checking for my keys. He watched me the whole way to the door, not saying anything else, just standing there with the same stretched smile, except now it looked like a mask that didn't fit right. His eyes didn't blink much. I opened the door myself and stepped out, pretending I didn't feel his stare on my back. The porch light flickered as it shut behind me. Outside, the air felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. I walked to my car parked along the curb and noticed something that made me stop for a second. The back bumper had scratches, long, fresh ones, like something had been dragged against it. The kind that didn't look like a careless driver's mistake. I bent down a little to look closer. There were fibers too, bits of fabric stuck in one of the seams. I got in fast, locking the doors before I even started the engine. The neighborhood was quiet, the street empty, but I kept checking the rearview mirror until I was back on a main road. On the drive back to the hospital, I couldn't stop hearing that sound. Not in the car, but in my head. That exact same metal-on-metal tapping. It played on loop, matching the rhythm I'd heard down in his basement. 3 days passed. I didn't tell anyone. Not at work. Not my roommate. I kept going to my shifts like normal. I tried to tell myself it wasn't what I thought, that there was some other explanation. Then, on a break around 4 a.m., I was scrolling news while eating a granola bar. That's when I saw it. Local man arrested on suspicion of kidnapping. The photo was small and grainy, but it was Brandon. Same shirt from the night I was there. The article said the victim escaped when Brandon took them to the ER for a broken wrist. The hospital staff got suspicious, called security. Police found signs of long-term restraint in the house. The report said the victim had been held for 2 weeks, in the basement. I didn't finish the granola bar. I put my phone down and walked to the sink, washed my hands slowly, just to do something. My eyes were on the drain, but in my mind I kept seeing that door. The one with a shadow behind it. The one I walked away from while someone might have been trying to scream. Later that morning, I gave the police the date and time of my visit. They asked questions, took notes. The detective leaned back and said, "No one listens when the pipes scream for help." I didn't know what to say to that. Back at the hospital, I had to file a report about being involved in an active investigation. It went to HR. I spent a day writing and rewriting it so it wouldn't sound like I ignored someone in danger. I didn't tell them about the shadow, about the scratches on my car. Just the basics. They didn't ask for more. Some of my friends laughed nervously when I told them the story, said I should carry pepper spray. Some said they'd never use dating apps again. I bought the spray, but mostly I just keep my keys between my fingers when I walk to my car now. When I meet someone new, I check databases, arrest records, addresses, old social media, not just Google. I stopped giving people the benefit of the doubt. No one wants to believe that someone can make jokes, order noodles, and still be the kind of person who locks someone in a basement. I think about that night sometimes. How close I was. How that door wasn't locked. How I could have opened it. Or knocked. Or asked more questions. But I didn't. I don't know what would have happened if I stayed until morning. I don't know how long I sat on that couch while someone was down there. I only know that sometimes, the sound that saves you doesn't sound like a scream. It's a knock, or a tap, or a scratch. And sometimes, one noise is the only thing standing between you and a locked door. It happened last September, while I was opening another pack of coffee at my usual cafe before heading into work. I had a habit of checking the dating app while waiting for the espresso machine to warm up. That morning, the screen lit up. Alex liked your photos. His profile was clean, minimal, with a few travel shots, one with his dog, and one where he stood in front of a mountain range. We started chatting that afternoon. His messages were quick, nothing too pushy. I liked that. We joked about office life, bad dates, and he kept sending these stupid memes that made me laugh at the worst times, like in meetings. We messaged every day that week, mostly late in the evening after work. The way he wrote felt easy, familiar. By Thursday, he suggested grabbing dinner. He offered a popular restaurant in the city center. Said he'd been there a few times and it had good lighting, good people. I checked the reviews. Crowded, open late, close to public transport. It didn't feel risky. I said yes. Friday came, and I picked a casual outfit. Nothing flashy, just jeans and a jacket. He messaged that he'd already arrived and was holding a table by the window. When I got there, he stood up, waved, and smiled. In person, he looked just like his photos, maybe slightly taller. The restaurant was loud but not chaotic. Families finishing dinner, couples tucked in booths, waiters zigzagging with plates. We ordered food, and the conversation flowed. He had this way of always finding a story that matched whatever I said. Not in a weird way, more like someone who paid attention. Topics shifted fast: music, old roommates, travel. I found myself nodding a lot, laughing more than I expected. At one point I looked around and realized the tables were half empty. The kitchen noise had dropped. A few waiters started clearing away salt shakers and wiping tables. We didn't stop talking. Drinks came and went. He told me about his job in logistics, working remotely for a shipping company. Showed me a photo of his dog again, a Labrador named Frank. I remember thinking how it was probably one of the easiest first dates I'd had in a long time. We didn't check our phones much, except once when I texted my roommate to say I'd be late. By the time the lights dimmed a little more and music changed to something softer, we were the only ones left besides two workers folding napkins near the bar. A guy came over and asked if we needed anything else. Alex glanced at me. "Should we head out?" I nodded. Outside, the street was mostly empty. A few cars passed now and then. He offered me a ride. I hesitated for a second, enough for him to notice, and he added quickly, "No pressure. Just thought I'd save you the train ride." His car was parked just across the road, a silver sedan, clean, not flashy. I texted my friend Anna. "Heading home, Alex. All good." She didn't reply right away, but I figured she was asleep. Inside the car, it smelled like mint gum. There were no messy coffee cups or gym bags, just a box of tissues on the passenger door. He started the engine, put on some quiet instrumental music, something jazzy. I didn't recognize it. I buckled up. We pulled into the street, and for a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then I glanced at the dashboard. The speedometer was past 90. I shifted in my seat a little. "You're kind of flying," I said, half joking. He waved it off. "Road's empty." I didn't press it, just watched the lights outside blur past faster. The buildings thinned out as we hit the bigger road out of downtown. I remember counting streetlights to calm myself. We passed a 60 sign. He didn't slow down. Then I saw flashing blue lights behind us. Police. Alex hissed something under his breath and kept driving for another 10 seconds before pulling to the side. I kept my hands on my lap. He rolled down the window. The officer leaned in, flashlight cutting across the car. "License and registration, please." His voice was calm, but I could feel the tension settle between us. Alex opened the glove compartment and started fumbling. Papers scattered. His face tightened. His jaw kept twitching like he was chewing on a thought. He muttered something I didn't catch and flipped through insurance forms. A second officer approached my side of the car. "Ma'am, would you mind stepping out for a moment?" His tone was polite but firm. I glanced at Alex. He didn't look at me. I got out. The pavement was cold against my sneakers, and the air stung my arms. I'd left my jacket in the restaurant. The officer guided me toward the patrol car, just far enough that I couldn't hear the first conversation. Behind me, I heard static crackle on the radio. One of the officers pressed something on his shoulder. 10-4. Confirmed. Vehicle reported stolen this morning. I froze. Alex's voice rose, still calm but more urgent, like he was trying not to sound panicked. "It's a rental. There's a mix-up. I extended it. They must have..." The first officer interrupted. "Hands on the hood, sir." Metal clicked. I turned just in time to see them cuffing him. He didn't resist. Didn't look at me once. His head dropped forward. The second officer came back, opened the rear door of the patrol car. "For your safety, ma'am. Please take a seat." I sat. The inside smelled of plastic and worn fabric. I looked out through the mesh between the seats, watching as they patted him down and read something from a small notepad. I didn't know what to think. My hands sat still in my lap. I didn't touch my phone. The blue lights kept circling over the trees around us like a slow warning. At the station, a tired-looking woman at the front desk handed me a paper cup of water and a form to fill out. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My fingers were shaking. I kept going over the week in my head, every chat, every call. Nothing felt out of place. That's what bothered me. A detective sat down across from me. He had deep lines near his eyes, probably in his 50s. Did he ever mention what kind of car he drove? I shook my head. Only said it was his, used it for work. Did the lock seem tampered with when you got in? I didn't notice. He nodded slowly, scribbled something. He's been picked up before. Auto theft. He files down the VN plate, covers it with a fake cap on the steering column. Looks pretty normal until you know where to check. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the desk. The coffee ring near the corner. The edge of a paperclip caught in the laminate. You're lucky, he added. Could have been worse. A lot of people don't walk away from rides like that. I nodded. I didn't even ask what he really did for work. He didn't answer. Just slid the form toward me again. I finished writing. They offered to call someone. I said no. Pulled up a taxi app, clicked on the share location feature, and chose tracking for the entire route. The dispatcher didn't ask questions. A black car showed up in 10 minutes. I sat in the back, phone screen glowing in my lap. The driver didn't speak. The silence was good. I looked out the window at every stoplight. Every other car looked unfamiliar. I deleted the dating app before we hit the freeway. A week later, a plain envelope came in the mail. No markings except for my name and a court date. Inside was a subpoena. I had to testify. I'd been the last person seen with him before the stop. I wore black slacks and a button-up, kept my hair tied back. The courtroom was cold. Alex was there, cuffed again, wearing a gray jumpsuit. He didn't look around. He didn't acknowledge me. The judge didn't need long. Repeat offense, failure to return rental property, intent to conceal identification. 3 years. That was it. Outside, I took the long walk back to the metro, bought a token, sat on a bench until my train arrived. I didn't scroll my phone. Since then, I've kept to trains and walking routes, even if it rains, even if it's late. Every time someone offers a ride, my chest tightens. I hear the snap of cuffs, smell mint gum. Trust isn't a seatbelt. It's just another thing that breaks under pressure. Now, when I meet someone new, I scan their plates. QR codes on rental windows, match names to licenses, check the tiniest details. Not out of paranoia, just caution. Sometimes the thing that saves your life is a 10-second scan on a dusty windshield. I've been pouring beers in the same sports bar for 5 years. It's not glamorous, but it pays rent, and I know every crack in the bar top and every regular's order before they sit down. We get packed during game nights, but weekdays are chill. That's when I usually worked with Jennifer. She was sharp, kept pace on busy nights, and had this habit of flipping through Hinge between tables. Her phone was always tucked under the counter, screen dimmed. Most of the time she just swiped and rolled her eyes. Nothing ever came of it until June. One Tuesday, between refilling ketchup bottles and counting tip-outs, she turned her screen to me. "Connor," she said. "Photographer. Freelance." The guy was good-looking. His profile was full of soft, moody portraits that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Foggy mornings, strangers in cafes, black and white close-ups of street musicians. His bio was vague. Something about chasing light, loving silence, and living slow. I made a dumb joke about it sounding like a yoga retreat, but she liked him. Said they'd been messaging for a week. They planned to meet that Friday. After close on Thursday, she was fixing her eyeliner in the mirror above the sink. I asked where they were going, and she said, "Just drinks, somewhere near Montrose." She didn't seem nervous, just focused. Wore something black, tight around the waist. I teased her to text if she needed an excuse to bail. She smirked and walked out. Friday came. Her shift was supposed to start at 4. She never showed. At 5, I texted. No reply. I figured maybe she traded shifts and forgot to tell me. Happens. By 7, I was juggling tables and couldn't think about it. Around 10, I glanced at her usual spot in the back. Empty. I texted again. Nothing. When we closed, her phone still hadn't lit up. I walked home telling myself she must have stayed over or drank too much to check in. Saturday morning I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. I opened our work chat. No messages. That was off. Jennifer always posted if she was running late or needed cover. I messaged Dave, our manager. He said she hadn't reached out either. I waited a few more hours. Checked her Instagram. Last post was from Thursday. A mirror selfie with the caption, "Ready." Nothing since. Comments piling under it. "You good? Text me." That's when I felt it. Something wasn't right. By lunch, I got a call from her roommate. "She never came home," she said. "Not Friday, not last night." She sounded tired. Said Jennifer never disappeared like that, not without a text. They weren't super close, but still. I told her about the date. I described Connor as best I could. What he looked like, the bio, the vibe. I still had the link to his Hinge profile. Sent it to her. She said she was calling the cops. The police showed up at the bar an hour later. I told them everything. When she left, where she said she was going, what she wore. The name of the bar she mentioned near Montrose. I gave them the link, even though Hinge profiles aren't like social media. You need to match to see much. The officer asked if I'd ever seen him in person. I hadn't. He asked if Jennifer ever seemed worried, or if she mentioned anyone bothering her. She hadn't. By Monday, her face was on posters. Missing, printed in big black font. The photo was from her last birthday, cropped close to her face. That weird, smiling kind of picture people post when they don't expect it to be used like this. The posters were taped to light poles and stuck in gas station windows. Her shift schedule still had her name on it, ghosting me every evening. I walked past the Montrose bar she mentioned. No one recognized her photo. Connor's profile vanished. The link I sent the cops now led to a 404 page, like he'd never existed. I tried to find him again. Used my own Hinge account, then made another. Swiped until my eyes ached, trying to remember his face, his bio, the pictures. Nothing. Every day I worked, I checked the bar door more times than I can count. Nothing. One of the detectives came back to ask if I remembered anything else. I didn't. But later that night, something clicked. In his bio, he'd mentioned gear. I remembered because it stood out. Most guys just say dumb lines or emojis. He'd listed camera models. One was a rare lens. I Googled it, and only a handful of photographers were posting shots with it. I made a new profile. Name, Madison. Age 27, location set to a wide radius. Swiped right on every man holding a camera. Every single one with city shots, moody filters, or portraits with watermarks. A month later, I saw the face again. Same jawline, same eyes, same lens. The name was different this time. Blake. but the camera slung across his chest in the profile photo had that rare lens. I'd only seen a handful of people post with it. The caption under his latest shot read, "Chasing light in quiet corners." I swiped right. We matched within minutes. I messaged first, told him I was looking for a location to shoot a personal project. Something quiet, natural light, out of the way. He replied within the hour, suggested a small cafe near the park, said it had great shadows in the back room. I said that sounded perfect. Before the meeting, I bought a second phone, installed an app that could record audio with the screen off. I charged it, tested the mic, then taped it to the inside of my purse. The rest of the day, I tried not to shake. When I got there, I picked a booth near the window, but with a view of the door. Ordered a black coffee and waited. He arrived on time. Slim jacket, camera bag, same slow, quiet smile as in the photos. He sat down across from me. "Hope the place works," he said. "I found some cool spots around here. One of them is practically abandoned." He talked easily, described empty buildings, an old train platform, a field behind a warehouse. He liked privacy, he said. Liked places where no one interrupted. I stirred my coffee, barely sipping. My hands were damp. The chair scraped when I shifted, my knees trembling under the table. I forced a smile. Laughed when he mentioned how some people didn't get his vibe. He talked about trust, about how most photographers don't understand real moments. I nodded, watched the red timer blink through the lining of my purse. He leaned forward. "We could shoot this weekend, just the two of us. I've got a spot. Real quiet." I said I'd think about it. The moment I got home, I copied the recording to a USB. Next morning, I went straight to the station. I gave it to the detective who had taken Jennifer's case. He didn't say much, just took the drive and asked for the app name. 2 days later, he called me in. Said they matched the voice to an open file, another missing woman, months back. Similar circumstances. Said the guy had given the name Blake once before, but also Derek, Andrew, even Tom on other platforms. The lens, he said, might finally pin him down. They brought him in under some excuse about a property complaint. Low pressure. When they showed him the printed messages from Madison, he stared too long. Sweat glistened on his neck. Didn't speak for a while. Then asked for water. After 7 hours, he folded. Told them about the ravine. A place outside the city, past the old quarry. Used to be a dumping site, now overgrown. The tape around the trees showed up on the evening news. Yellow bands cutting through brush. Officers in gloves combing the ground. The news anchor's voice was too calm. Said remains were found. Said positive identification was pending. I recognized the stretch of trees from one of his profile photos. My stomach twisted. I left the bar early that night. Couldn't stand the noise. Walked home instead of taking the train. Needed quiet. The streetlights buzzed. I didn't look anyone in the eye. The trial didn't take long. The state charged him with murder. Second count confirmed. The judge spoke clearly. The defense said it was a tragic misunderstanding. That it started as consent and turned wrong. They called it an accident. The prosecutor showed the messages, the matching lens, the record of fake names across 3 cities. I stood in the back row when the verdict came. I didn't cry. Couldn't. That night I deleted Hinge. Deleted every app with a heart icon. Blocked the burner accounts I'd made. I still poured drinks. Same bar, same regulars. People come in with dates, swiping between beers. Laughing, showing profiles to their friends. Sometimes they ask if I ever feel nervous walking home late. I just shrug. Tell them danger doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it sends a like and asks if you're free Friday night. If someone you know goes missing, don't wait for the police to figure it out. Don't assume there's time. Sometimes you have to become someone else to find the truth. Sometimes you have to play a stranger just to bring your friend back home. It happened last winter, just after the release at work. The whole team had been pushing overtime for weeks, and when it finally shipped, I felt like a walking shell. A couple of us grabbed beers that Friday, and someone mentioned dating apps. I'd never used them seriously, but it was Jason who said, "Try Hinge. It's less desperate than Tinder. You might even meet someone with a job." Everyone laughed. I downloaded it half-jokingly that night while still a little buzzed, thumbed through some profiles, and forgot about it. 2 days later, Rachel matched with me. Her first message wasn't a hi, but "Why does your last commit message say fix? It works now, I swear." Turns out she was also in software and somehow had seen a public repo of mine. I laughed and wrote back. It went fast from there. Memes, bug rants, sarcastic jokes about product managers. I liked how she wrote, short and dry, no overcomplicated emojis or small talk. We agreed to meet up that Friday. The bar she picked was loud, with TVs blaring and people yelling over a game I didn't care about. I spotted her in a booth near the back. Brown jacket, phone in hand, already sipping something pale. She smiled when she saw me. No awkward handshake, just, "You look more tired than your profile." She slid over, and I sat. The beer flowed easy. She asked about my recent trip to Norway, and I told her about the missed connection in Oslo, the overpriced sandwiches, how my friend fell asleep on a fjord tour. She laughed, leaning in a little, head tilted like she was tuning me in. She had this way of squinting while listening that made her look suspicious and amused at the same time. At some point, I checked the time. 11:23. I figured we'd wrap it up, maybe exchange polite goodbyes. But then she said, "You want to come over for wine?" Real casual, like asking if I wanted fries with that. I had a rule. No going home with anyone on a first date. Not after midnight, not after drinking. But I looked at her. She seemed normal. Grounded. I shrugged. Sure. The Uber dropped us in front of a small building that looked like it was holding itself together out of habit. The kind of place where the intercom's broken and nobody fixes it. As we climbed the stairs, the walls were lined with chipped beige paint and that old rug smell you can't clean out no matter how hard you try. 3rd floor, end of the hall. Rachel fumbled with the keys for a bit, laughing softly at how the lock always stuck, then shoved the door with her shoulder. Inside, a dim bulb in a corner lamp threw a soft orange hue over everything. There was a sagging 2-seater couch, a tiny kitchen to the right, and some half-unpacked boxes against the wall. She tossed her coat on a chair and walked to the kitchen. "Chardonnay okay?" she asked. I nodded and wandered over to a shelf near the door. There were a couple of movie ticket stubs, old concert wristbands, and a postcard that said, "See you in Tokyo, M." Nothing special, but arranged neatly. I heard the pop of the wine bottle. The room smelled faintly of dry wood and the faint sour note of leftover heat. I sat as she handed me the glass and plopped down next to me. Music started playing from her phone. Some slow indie track, almost too quiet to catch the words. We clinked glasses. Through the window, I could hear the street below humming with late traffic. A loud bang shattered the quiet. The front door slammed open so hard the glasses rattled in our hands. A man stumbled in, tall, wide, covered in tattoos that seemed to shift and roll across his arms as he moved. His face was already red with rage. You think you can just walk into someone's life and break up a family? He shouted, pointing straight at me. His voice was deep and cracked, like someone who had shouted too many times before. I looked at Rachel, confused. She jumped to her feet, hands up like she was trying to calm a wild animal. He's just a friend, she snapped, stepping between us. I didn't move at first. My mind was blank, then running too fast. I realized my breath was loud. Too loud. The man's fists were clenched. I stood slowly, keeping my eyes on him. He stepped forward. I backed away toward the hallway, past the kitchen. Explaining anything felt pointless. He wasn't here to listen. I reached for my shoes without bending down, half hopping as I grabbed them. He came at me like a train, yelling something I couldn't catch. I turned and sprinted, not waiting to put my shoes on. I heard Rachel's voice trying to cut through the noise, then the pounding of his steps right behind me. Someone's door down the hall creaked open. A tired voice asked, "What's going on out there?" I didn't answer. My feet hit the stairs, one after another, bare skin against freezing concrete. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. I felt the rough texture under my soles, every step like sandpaper. When I hit the street, the cold cut deep, slicing into my feet like ice razors. But I ran. I ran without thinking, past the silent cars, past a flickering streetlight, past a guy smoking who barely looked up. At the third block, I turned my head. No one. No heavy footsteps, no angry shouting. Just my breath, raw and fast, and the soft noise of traffic far off. My heart was pounding like a loop stuck in a bad compile. No output, just heat and pressure. My hands still clenched my shoes. At home, I sat under the shower. Hot water hit my back, but I didn't feel warm. My feet were red and scraped. I just sat there. The phone buzzed somewhere on the counter. Later, when I checked, it was Rachel. First message, "I'm so sorry." Then, "It was a misunderstanding. Please don't take it the wrong way." Then, "He wasn't supposed to come back tonight." I didn't reply. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I turned it off. In the morning, I blocked her. Deleted Hinge. Told myself I'd give it a rest. At work, Jason joked that I disappeared after the first date. I didn't say much. One of the QA guys said these setups sometimes lead to fights. He'd heard stories. I didn't correct him. Mostly, I felt stupid. Not just for going with her. For relaxing. For thinking wine and soft music meant anything safe. Now, if I go on a date, I book a separate ride, and I say no if someone offers just a drink at their place. I don't walk into someone's apartment like I'm part of their life. Not anymore. Jealousy's a knife. And sometimes people don't care who gets cut. If the door swings open too hard, don't ask questions. Just run. Even if you're barefoot. So, I was on a night shift alone in the server room. Nothing dramatic, just checking logs, watching blinking lights, sipping cheap coffee from the machine that always tasted like plastic. Around 2:30 a.m., the silence really started to crawl under my skin, so I pulled out my phone and started messing with a new dating app that I had downloaded earlier out of boredom. Most profiles were the usual: heavy filters, fake quotes, dog pics, until I saw her. Victoria. Blonde, sharp cheekbones, a kind of effortless look, like she just came back from some music festival in the Alps. Her bio was short, something about liking quiet walks and old tech, and one line stood out: "If your Wi-Fi is weak, I'm not staying over." I chuckled and swiped. We matched immediately. I messaged something dumb about server racks being romantic, and she replied within a minute. We bounced short jokes for a while, mostly about bad Wi-Fi, slow connections, and what snacks we'd bring to a tech-themed picnic. It was light. She seemed smart and had this clipped way of typing that didn't feel fake. After maybe 20 minutes, she said, "We should meet up sometime." I agreed. She suggested a spot just outside the city, a quiet suburb with old houses and wide, empty streets. No bars, no shops, just one of those places with lots of trees and barely any light after dark. That was odd. Most people want to meet halfway, near people, somewhere public. I said, "Could we do a quick video call first?" There was this pause, maybe 10 seconds, and then she wrote, "Okay, give me a second." I waited. A few more minutes passed. I was just about to put my phone down when she called. Her camera turned on, and yeah, it was her. Mostly, but not completely. Right away I noticed her hair wasn't the same. In the pictures she had light blonde hair, straight, like it had been styled for a shoot. Now, on camera, it was darker. Not just lighting, it was closer to brown, and the roots looked uneven, like she had dyed it herself a while back and hadn't maintained it. I asked her, trying to keep it casual, "Did you dye your hair recently?" She blinked fast and smiled. "Yeah, got bored of blonde." Fair enough. I didn't push it. But then I asked about the movie she said she loved earlier. Her, the one with Joaquin Phoenix. She'd mentioned it in the chat just a few hours before. Now she squinted a little. "Wait, which one?" I said. "You wrote Her was your comfort movie." Another pause. "Oh, yeah, that one. It's so good." But it didn't sound like she really meant it. Her tone flattened. Her eyes shifted off camera. Then something moved behind her. Not clearly, just a blur. But it looked like someone walked by in the background. A tall figure. Male. I only caught a glimpse of an elbow and a shadow. She was in some kind of living room, low lighting, some soft glow from a lamp. I couldn't see the whole space. Just her face, shoulders, and part of the couch behind her. I didn't say anything right away, but I started looking more carefully at the frame. She had earphones in, the mic built into the wire near her collar. I asked, "Where are you calling from?" She said, "Home. I live with roommates." That didn't match her earlier messages. She'd said she lived alone, liked the quiet. I didn't correct her, just asked, "Which neighborhood again?" She hesitated. Maplewood, I think." She thinks? Maplewood was in the opposite direction of where she told me to meet her. And people don't forget where they live. I said, "Isn't that on the east side?" She glanced off screen again, as if checking with someone. "Yeah, east. Wrong. Maplewood's west." I knew that because I'd done some IT repair jobs there. This time I didn't hide the shift in my voice. "You said earlier the meetup spot was near Willow Creek." She looked down like she was thinking. "Oh, right. I meant close to that. It's all kind of the same area." It wasn't. Not even close. I leaned forward and stared at the screen. Then I noticed something else. In the photos on her profile, there was a small mole above her lip on the right side. Nothing huge, but clearly visible. On this call, her skin was clear. Completely. No mole. I stared, then tried to casually ask, "Did you edit your pics, or is that just the lighting?" She tilted her head. "What do you mean? Your face looks a little different. Like, there used to be a small mole?" She smiled tightly. "Oh, that. Old photos. I had it removed." The answer came fast, too smooth. I didn't believe it. Something about the voice had changed too. A different rhythm, more controlled, slower, like she was thinking before each word. Then I heard a faint laugh, just barely picked up by her mic. It wasn't hers. It came from her left, off camera. A low chuckle, then a whisper, almost like someone had leaned in and said something. She caught it too. Her eyes flicked sideways for a split second, then she leaned closer to the screen, blocking more of the background with her face. "Sorry, my roommate's being dumb," she said quickly. I nodded slowly, keeping my face neutral. "You still want to meet up tomorrow?" She smiled. "Yes, but maybe somewhere more private. Like, not a park. Too many people." I kept my voice steady. "What did you have in mind?" She leaned in, eyes too still. "There's a trail near the quarry. No one really goes there." I told her I'd call her back and ended the video. My hand was still on the mouse, but I wasn't moving. Just sitting there, heart beating too hard. I opened a new tab and dropped her photo into a reverse image search. It took about 15 seconds. Then it came up, stock photo. A dozen versions of her face under different names, in different countries, for different purposes. I clicked through one, then another. All fake. I switched back to the app. The chat window was gone. Her profile didn't exist anymore. Just vanished. No trace. Like it had never been there. I checked my phone's Wi-Fi, solid signal. But what if I had gone? If I'd showed up in some quiet suburb, chasing a fake smile? I remembered seeing something in the news a few weeks back. A short article about fake dating profiles used to lure men into isolated spots where they'd get robbed, sometimes worse. No one ever thought it would be them. I sat there, staring at the screen, imagining myself in some dark cul-de-sac, no signal, no help, maybe surrounded by 3 guys waiting in a parked car. I opened the app's support page, filled out a report, attached screenshots, wrote out everything that happened, step by step. Then I cleared the chat, deleted the cache, and uninstalled the app. It was nearly 4 a.m. by then. The server room was cold, and I didn't feel like making more coffee. 2 days later, I was at my desk when our front desk forwarded me a weird envelope. No return address. Just my first name, handwritten, block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You walked away from easy money." I sat back, reading it again. No threat. No name. Just that sentence. I didn't say anything for an hour, just kept checking my building's doors, windows, emails. Eventually, I forwarded it to our IT team. They took it seriously, traced the print job, scanned the paper. Eventually, they pulled the IP from the app's last known activity, tied it to a private connection in another state, out of our jurisdiction. I sent everything to a federal contact we'd worked with on a past cybersecurity case. A week later, he called me. "This is a known operation," he said. "They build dozens of these profiles. They monitor who swipes, who chats. When one shows interest, they isolate them. Some just rob. Others do worse." His voice was flat. Matter of fact, like he'd seen it happen too many times. I thanked him, and we hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I wasn't panicking. But that thin film of safety I used to take for granted, it wasn't there anymore. Now, I only agree to meet people in crowded places. Restaurants, malls, coffee shops with cameras and exits. Never parking lots, never quiet parks. My friends joke that I look like a paranoid cop every time I scan a room, but I'd rather be the guy who overthinks than the one who disappears. Sometimes my face hurts after a date, not from smiling, but from the constant awareness. Like I'm measuring every micro-expression, every misplaced word. I look for inconsistencies. I listen for background noises. I memorize license plates of cars near my building. I installed security cameras near my front door. Not just the kind that alert you when someone rings, These record everything. Every delivery truck, every dog walker, every unknown car that parks for too long. I check them at night before bed. Dating apps promise you connection in a tap. But every swipe, every match, every quick laugh can cost more than your time. I used to think fake profiles were just bots or bored people. Now I know better. I saw what could have happened with just one yes. Somewhere out there, someone is still making those profiles, uploading those same stock photos, waiting for another night shift, another bored scroll, another isolated target. I don't answer video calls unless I request them. I don't follow links. I don't trust bios that are too smooth. And if anything feels wrong, even a little, I hang up first. I hadn't met anyone offline in over a year, not by accident either. I worked remotely, ordered everything to the door, and barely responded to calls. But Victoria had been patient. Too patient, maybe. She texted me almost every day for months, memes, voice notes, little updates about her cat. It felt weirdly normal. She never pushed to meet in person, not until last week. She said she found the best steak place in the city, swore it was worth breaking my isolation streak. I hesitated for 2 days, then finally replied, "Okay." The address came a minute later. It looked strange, just a pin, no restaurant name. I copied it into maps. It led to a blank corner of an industrial area, but curiosity got the better of me. The taxi driver didn't say anything when we stopped. I looked out and saw no signs, no people, just the edge of a warehouse with fading paint and rust creeping up the metal walls. A chain-link fence ran along one side, half collapsed. I asked if he was sure it was the right place. He just pointed to his phone and nodded. I got out. The air was dry and full of dust. A few streetlights blinked in the distance, none working properly. I stood still for a moment. My heart was already racing, but I couldn't tell if it was nerves or just the silence. I checked the message again. "Just go in. You'll like it, I promise." My fingers hovered over the call button. I didn't see any doors at first. I walked closer. I called her. She answered right away but didn't say hello. Just whispered, "Go through the side door. It's cracked open." Then she hung up. Her voice didn't sound like the messages. It was low, fast, like she was hiding. I turned toward the side of the building. The sun had dipped behind the buildings, and everything was washed in blue-gray twilight. The wall was covered in graffiti, some of it old tags, some newer ones that looked rushed. I found the door half covered by a bent piece of sheet metal. It hung awkwardly, like it had been ripped and left. I stepped over a tire, some broken plastic, then pushed at the door. The glass under my sneakers snapped with each step. I couldn't tell if it was from windows or bottles. The light from the outside barely reached past the doorway. Inside, it was darker. My phone buzzed once. Network signal dropped to 1 bar. I turned the flashlight on, but it barely cut through the shadows. The beam bounced off something in the distance. A shape. Maybe a pole or a pipe. I took 2 more steps. The smell hit me then. Rust. Old metal, like water left sitting in iron. My shoulders tensed. Something clinked on the floor behind me. Tiny, like a screw falling. I turned fast, but saw nothing. I held the phone up, trying to get another bar. Nothing. I turned back and moved in farther. My shoe tapped a metal sheet and it echoed. Then again. The sound stretched, long, bouncing between the walls. I waited. No answer. In the corner, something flickered. A reflection. A quick blink of silver. I stepped closer. The air got colder. I couldn't hear any traffic outside anymore. No cars, no voices, just the hollow space around me. I paused near a stack of wooden pallets leaning against the wall. One had splinters sticking out. I moved my phone's light over them. Some were stained dark, like grease. Or something thicker. I called out her name. Quiet. Not a yell. Just enough to test the space. It didn't echo like the metal did. It just got swallowed. I waited. No reply. The reflection was gone now, or maybe I'd imagined it. But the corner still looked strange, like something had been dragged. There was a long smear on the concrete. Dust covered most of the floor, but there, it was wiped clean. A narrow path, maybe a foot wide, disappearing behind a low stack of crates. I started moving toward it. Slow, controlled steps, like if I walked too fast, the sound would give me away. The light blinked again. Not my phone. Something ahead. A flashlight? It was just a flicker, like someone turning it on then off by mistake. I raised my phone higher. The beam hit the far wall. Something hung there, on a nail. A jacket. Black. It swayed slightly, like it had been touched recently. The smell was stronger now. Not just rust. Sweat. Something else I couldn't place. I held my breath without meaning to. Then I heard a sound. Breathing. Not mine. Slow. Shallow. Just behind the crates. My hands tightened around the phone. I didn't say anything. Just took one more step forward. The crate creaked slightly. The breathing stopped. The breathing was gone. But I stayed frozen. My eyes adjusted just enough to make out the outline. A man, tall, maybe 6 feet, stood behind the crates. He held something long, angled metal, maybe a crowbar. His shoulders were stiff. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood like he was waiting. Then, from above, a speaker crackled to life. The sound wasn't clear at first, just static. Then a woman's voice, calm and steady, said my name. I didn't recognize the tone. It wasn't how Victoria had sounded in messages or even on that call. My back tightened. Every part of me screamed to get out. I turned without thinking. My foot slipped a little on the dust, but I caught myself. The way I came in looked darker than before. I didn't hear the door until it slammed, loud and sharp, as if someone had kicked it from the inside. I ran. My shoulder clipped a stack of metal cans, sending them rolling. One hit my ankle hard, but I kept moving. I didn't check behind me. I didn't look for the man. I slammed my side into the half-open door and forced my way through. A nail caught the edge of my jacket and tore it wide open. I stumbled out, falling against the cold concrete. My hands scraped on the ground as I caught myself. The warehouse behind me stayed silent. I didn't stop. I pushed off the ground and sprinted to the street. My chest burned. The sidewalk blurred under me. The road at the corner was empty. No cars, no people. The taxi that had dropped me off was gone. I didn't think, just ran toward the intersection, hoping someone, anyone, might be there. I didn't stop until I saw the bus stop ahead. The bus stop was half lit, one side of the shelter broken. I ducked behind the metal panel and leaned against it, trying to calm my breathing. It didn't help. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. Still 1 bar. I checked the map again, even though I knew where I was. Then I opened the taxi app. It froze once, then finally let me order a car. A few minutes later, a small gray hatchback pulled up. I forced myself to walk casually, but the driver noticed right away. "You okay?" he asked, eyeing the blood on my sleeve and the torn jacket. I nodded and gave him the address of a co-working center I used sometimes, just to be around people. He didn't ask more questions. I stared out the window. My phone buzzed again. It was her. "Why did you leave?" the message said. Then another. "Are you okay?" I didn't reply. I opened the chat and deleted the entire thread. Then I went into my settings and removed the SIM card registration. Tossed the SIM out the window as the taxi turned. I didn't talk for the rest of the ride. For a week, I didn't tell anyone. I avoided messages, ignored updates, and logged off every app I could think of. The thought of that warehouse, that voice, that man with the crowbar, it stayed close, just under the surface. I barely slept. Then, 6 months later, I saw it. It was a local news story. Some kind of police operation. A gang had been luring people through dating apps and chat groups. The anchor said the victims were robbed, some assaulted. One person had disappeared completely. They showed a blurry photo taken from a police drone, an old warehouse. Same rust patterns, same broken fence, same door with the bent sheet metal. One victim had survived. Apparently, the attackers didn't manage to finish the job. He escaped, ran to a nearby gas station, and collapsed. He gave the police a few details, and it helped lead to arrests. When I saw that part, something clicked. I sent in a report. A detective followed up 2 days later. We spoke over a secure line. I told him everything I remembered. What she said on the phone, the shape of the room, the graffiti, the metal object, the voice on the speaker. He thanked me. Said that even after all this time, every piece of information helped. Now, I treat my online conversations like I'm reviewing someone's code at work. I check usernames. I reverse search profile pictures. I test links. I ask questions. I don't ignore warning signs just because someone uses the right emojis or sends voice notes that sound warm. The shame of running didn't last. It went away the moment I realized I was alive because I didn't wait to see what happened next. If a place doesn't match its description, it's not safe. If the vibe feels off, it probably is. Romantic dinners are easy bait. But once you walk through the wrong door, no one else is going to pull you out. You have to hit the exit button yourself. It happened in 2019, back when I still believed in dating apps. I'd been on Coffee Meets Bagel for a while and matched with this girl named Sasha. Her profile was full of soft tones and yoga poses. She wrote little captions about sunsets, meditation, clean eating. Her pictures looked normal, nothing flashy. A couple with her dog, one at the beach, one in leggings doing some yoga pose on a balcony. We chatted for about a week, slow pace, mostly evenings. Her replies weren't fast, but consistent. I checked her Instagram, just to be sure. It matched. Same pictures, same dog, a bunch of wellness quotes. No red flags. She suggested we meet in person. Said it's better than messaging too long. That already made me think she was normal, confident. She picked a public spot, a big fountain outside the city library. Said it was easy to find. I agreed. I got there maybe 10 minutes early, parked a few blocks away because it was a weekend and the closer lot was full. The weather was decent, clear sky, cool but not cold, lots of people around. Families, teens, some food trucks nearby. I stood near the fountain, watching water spurt from the center like always, checking my phone. Right at the meeting time, I got a text. "Hey, I'm running a bit late. Can you wait near the bus stop down the street? It's just around the corner." I checked the map. It was like a 3-minute walk. I didn't think much of it. Shrugged, typed, "Okay," and started walking. There were still a lot of people around. The bus stop was at the edge of a plaza, near where a few smaller shops lined the street. A cafe, a mobile store, a boutique. I stood next to the bench under the glass shelter. A few others were waiting too. I scrolled my phone for a bit, replied to some work emails. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. Then another message popped up. Sorry, can we meet near the supermarket instead? It's brighter there, feels better. That was about 2 blocks further. I felt a flicker of irritation, mostly because I don't like changing plans on the fly. But I figured, whatever, maybe she's just nervous. It wasn't worth making a fuss over. I walked over. It was a newish supermarket, all glass and steel, with automatic sliding doors that whooshed open and closed every few seconds. Inside was bright, full of movement. Shopping carts, loudspeaker music, families, the smell of hot food from the deli section. I stood near the entrance where people usually wait if they're picking someone up. I waited another 10 minutes. Still no Sasha. I texted, "Hey, are you nearby?" She replied instantly, "Almost there. Just wait a bit more." I sighed, glanced at the sky. It was turning a little orange now. The sun had started to dip. I checked the time again, then walked a few steps away from the door so I wasn't in the way. 15 minutes later, I got another message. "Can you come around the back? It's quieter there. I hate the noise." Something about that didn't sit right, but I told myself not to be dramatic. Maybe she really did hate crowds. I hesitated for maybe 5 seconds, then started walking. Around the side of the supermarket was a narrow lane used for deliveries. The concrete there was cracked, the walls stained with exhaust marks. I passed a dumpster, then the loading dock. There were a few metal doors, all locked shut. No workers around. No sound except a distant truck horn and the hum of ventilation fans above me. I got to the back of the building, and that's when I noticed how different it felt. No music, no chatter, no people pushing carts. Just a wide open space of packed dirt and broken pavement that stretched behind the supermarket. Some old pallets leaned against the wall. A few weeds poked up near the fence at the far end. The chain-link fence ran along the edge of what looked like an empty lot. Beyond it were some trees and the backs of other buildings. No one was there. I stood still, looked around, waited. Nothing. No one walking over. No footsteps, no doors opening. I pulled out my phone, checked her messages again. Still open. The last one. "Come around the back." That was 20 minutes ago. No new messages since. I typed, "I'm here," and hit send. The message went through. Red receipt showed up a few seconds later, but nothing came back. I waited another 5 minutes, just standing there. Still nothing. The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of something stale from the dumpster nearby. The light was dimmer now, the shadows sharper. I looked toward the empty lot again. No movement. The street behind the fence looked deserted. I stepped forward, past the edge of the building, just a little, trying to see if maybe she was approaching from the other side. But the only thing there was the back end of the lot. Broken glass, pieces of wood, a couple of plastic bags caught on the fence. Still, no one. I realized then I hadn't seen a single person back there the entire time. I was alone. From the shadows behind the pallets, 2 figures stepped out. One of them was short and stocky, the other tall, lean, with something in his hand. As he got closer, I saw it was a baseball bat, taped at the grip. They didn't run, didn't yell. Just walked up like they knew exactly what they were doing. I took a step back, but a third guy came out from behind the corner of the building, blocking the path I came from. The tall one pointed the bat at me and said, calm like he was asking for the time, "Wallet and phone." I didn't argue. My hands went up by reflex. I pulled out my wallet, then my phone, an iPhone 8 I'd had for a couple years. I held both out. The tall guy took them without a word. He turned them over in his hand, then leaned in close. "Sasha says hi," he whispered, his voice just loud enough for me to hear. My stomach dropped. It clicked instantly. There was no Sasha. There never was. It had all been a setup from the start. None of them smiled. They didn't run, didn't check the phone, didn't push me. They just backed up, turned, and walked off into the lot. I didn't follow them. I didn't yell. I stood there a second, then two, then turned and walked fast back toward the street. I didn't stop until I was near traffic, near people. Somewhere with lights and cameras. I didn't even think of chasing them. What was the point? I ran down the block until I saw a bar on the corner. The place was half full, music playing low, TVs showing sports. I went straight to the bartender and told him I'd been mugged. He gave me his phone. I called the police, hands shaking a little now that I was safe. An officer showed up 20 minutes later. Took down everything. Description of the guys, where it happened, what was taken. I showed him Sasha's profile on the dating app. He nodded without much surprise. Said they'd seen a few like this lately. I asked if I could get my stuff back. He didn't answer directly, just asked me to send over screenshots of the chat and her photos. The next morning, I checked with my bank. 2 ATM withdrawals had been made using my card, one for the daily limit and the other just under. Both done within an hour after the mugging. I canceled everything, changed passwords, locked accounts. The cops followed up in the afternoon, told me the app profile was already gone, deleted, like it never existed. They asked if I had backed up screenshots. I had a few. Not enough to help. I asked about surveillance. The back of the supermarket had cameras, right? The officer said maybe, but that area hadn't been working for months. No footage. Nothing to go on. It was clean. Too clean. No trace of the girl, no clear faces of the guys. Nothing that could hold up. The cop didn't promise much. Said they'd file it. That was it. For a while, I jumped at every notification. Every time I saw a profile photo with soft lighting or a dog, I clicked it, looking for some trace. But the account was gone. She, or whoever ran it, had been careful. Probably had 10 more just like it already running. I stopped using dating apps for months. The fear faded slowly. It took about a year before I stopped thinking about it daily. I bought a new phone on credit, paid it off month by month. To feel safer, I signed up for boxing. 3 nights a week. Nothing serious, just enough to keep my guard up. It helped more than I expected. Dating apps became minefields. If someone changed the meeting point more than twice, I unmatched. Didn't matter how good the chat was. No second chances. I told myself money's just money, you can make more of it. But the feeling of being played, being tricked, stayed. That stuck. Now, when I walk through a city, I don't look at windows or ads. I look at shadows. I check who's behind me. Who's standing still when everyone else is moving? I answer hi, only in places with crowds and cameras. Not alleys, not parking lots, not near dumpsters. Internet has real people, but it also has hunters. Back in 2011, I was 31 and living alone in a small rented apartment near the industrial part of the city. Work days were long, and weekends started blending into each other. Out of boredom more than anything else, I decided to try a dating site. I wasn't expecting much. Scrolling through profiles felt like flipping through an old catalog. Faces, some blurry, some over-edited, most with emojis and awkward bios. Then there was Elena. No emojis. Just a plain photo, maybe taken in her kitchen, with a neutral expression. Her messages were short, polite. Something about her tone stood out. Calm. Maybe too calm. But I liked the simplicity. We chatted a bit. Nothing flirty. More like two people on a bench watching the same thing quietly. After a week of exchanging messages, she suggested we meet. Said she liked a certain riverside bar. I'd been there once. Dim lights, old wood, faint smell of stale beer. Not fancy, but not a dive either. I agreed. She added, just before we finalized the time, "My friend is in town from another city. He might stop by." It caught me off guard. I stared at that message a few seconds longer than I should have. Still, I thought, whatever. Maybe she didn't want to come alone. I could respect that. The evening came. I wore jeans and a button-down shirt, no cologne. Weather was warm, air still. As I got closer to the river, I could hear the low murmur from the bar spilling into the street, glasses clinking, laughter layered under soft jazz from the speakers. I stepped in and scanned the room. They were already there. Elena sat at a high table by the window facing the entrance. She looked the same as her photo. Next to her, a man in a dark shirt and short beard was hunched slightly, phone in hand. They both looked up when I approached. She smiled, small, quick. He just nodded. I sat down. Elena introduced him as Alex, no last name. "From Novosibirsk," she added, like it explained something. The place was half full, dim lights reflecting off the windows. Waitress came. I ordered a cocktail. Elena already had one, half empty. Her glass looked untouched otherwise. No smudges, no ice melting, just sitting there. Alex ordered a second beer, didn't ask what I wanted. That felt odd. The first few minutes were normal. We talked about the city, traffic, that week's weather. Alex barely spoke. He stared at his phone a lot. Elena carried most of the small talk, always short, always smiling. I started to relax. The awkwardness faded as the conversation picked up pace. I thought maybe I'd judged them too soon. My drink arrived. Something citrusy, sharp, with a weird aftertaste I couldn't place. Still, it was cold and went down fast. A second one came not long after. I didn't remember asking for it, but Elena said, "You look thirsty," and laughed. It tasted sweeter, warmer, and I drank it slower. Music kept playing. Something about the overhead light bothered me. It buzzed, or maybe flickered. I blinked too much. At some point, I reached for the water glass in front of me. It felt warmer than I expected. I sipped, but it had an odd taste. Not dirty, just off. Elena tilted her head and smiled again, but her face looked different. I couldn't tell why. Alex finally spoke. Something about the river being low this season. But his voice felt too close, like he was speaking directly into my ear, though he was still across the table. My head swam. Words from their mouths started to blur, like the sound underwater. I tried saying something, maybe about stepping out for air, but it came out slurred. My tongue didn't move right. I looked down at my hands. They were resting on the table but didn't feel connected, just heavy and slow. I pushed my chair back, or tried to. The legs scraped the floor, louder than they should have. Elena leaned in. Her hair brushed her cheek. Her eyes looked straight into mine but didn't move. I wanted to stand. Legs didn't respond. My heart wasn't racing. It was slow, like it was thinking too long between each beat. The bar felt like it dimmed, or maybe the lights above me got brighter. The edges of my vision darkened. I saw Alex get up. He moved around the table, close. Too close. Elena didn't speak, just smiled again. I hated that smile by then. My chest felt tight. My throat was dry. I tried to say help, or maybe bathroom, but the words caught in my mouth like cotton. Their faces were the last thing I saw. Closer now. Alex leaning over me. Elena still in her seat. Watching. Faces close. Then, nothing. I woke up in the back of a moving car. My hands were tied in front of me with something like a belt or strap. My head felt like someone had driven a nail into it. Every sound was too loud, and the light outside stabbed my eyes. Through the window, I could see we were out of the city, passing through some kind of suburban area. Rows of quiet houses, gas stations, fences blurring past. The car smelled like old air freshener and something metallic. In the front seat, a man I hadn't seen before was driving. He was bigger than Alex, heavier, with buzzed hair and a wide neck. Elena sat in the passenger seat, calmly scrolling through her phone like she was waiting at the dentist. I leaned back, trying to breathe, trying to stay still and process what was happening. My mouth was dry, tongue still heavy, but fear cut through the fog. We slowed at a red light. I heard the click of the blinker. I looked at the door. The handle was right there, just a few inches away. No child lock. No sound from them. I twisted my body hard and yanked the handle. The door flung open and I hit the asphalt with my shoulder and side. Pain shot through my arm, but I was moving before I even felt it. Someone yelled behind me. Elena, I think. Male voice followed. Doors slammed. I ran. I didn't look back. I just aimed for the nearest thing that looked open. A convenience store about 20 meters away. Bright lights flickering behind dirty windows. I pushed through the door, stumbled inside, and knocked over a wire rack of snacks. People inside turned and froze. A woman behind the counter stood up. My hands were still bound, red from the pressure. I shouted, "Call the police!" But I was slurring. She took a step back. A guy near the fridge started dialing. I turned toward the door and waited for them to follow. But they didn't. Later, in the ambulance, I kept hearing the beeping from the store scanner, the high-pitched tone repeating every few seconds. The hospital was gray and smelled of antiseptic. They ran a drug test, something I couldn't pronounce. A sedative, not common. The dosage had been high enough to keep me under for hours. It started to make sense then. The 2 drinks, the warm water, the way the world slowed. A week later, a detective visited me. He said the case might be bigger. They were looking into 2 other reports, similar MO. One man was found robbed outside the city with broken ribs. Another never reported anything, but his family mentioned strange behavior after a date that lined up with similar descriptions. Both cases involved women using the same dating platform, under different names. The car was found a few days after that, burned out on a dirt road near the edge of the forest. No plates, nothing left inside. The detective said torching the car was a delay tactic. Buy time before evidence could be traced. A month passed. Then I got a call from the station. They'd been caught. Same setup. Another man, another bar. But this time the staff noticed something off. The guy they targeted had only sipped his drink and then excused himself to the bathroom. He never came back. Bartender followed and found him slumped on the floor near the back door. Called emergency services. Police arrived before they could move him. Elena and the other man, Mikhail, were both arrested in the parking lot. I was asked to come in and look at photos. I identified them right away. Her face hadn't changed. Neither had her eyes. Still that flat, calm stare. He looked angrier in the photo, like someone had finally cornered him. The court date was set for the following year. There's a scar on my elbow now. The jump from the car tore the skin and cracked the bone. The doctor said if I'd stayed under even 10 more minutes, things could have gone a lot worse. Apparently, People don't usually wake up that early after that kind of dosage. I got lucky. Now I never drink anything I didn't pour myself. Doesn't matter how friendly the person is. And if someone mentions they're bringing a friend from another city, that's it. I'm out. No second thoughts. Even now, if I hear a car stop suddenly outside my building at night, I freeze for a second. Wait to hear if the door opens. It fades eventually, but not completely. Some reflexes stay. A firm no saves your life sometimes. People talk about risk in dating like it's emotional, like heartbreak. But the risk is real. Risk has hands and duct tape and strangers behind the wheel. Next time I want a cocktail, I make it at home. When I was 19, buried in finals and sleeping maybe 3 hours a night, Instagram became the one place I could still feel like life was happening somewhere. I didn't post much, mostly watched stories, followed accounts about music and art. That's how I found Kevin. He was 35, into old jazz and obscure punk records, always posting stories from some new city. Berlin, Lisbon, Tokyo, never for long. He messaged me after I commented on a John Coltrane quote he posted. We talked music first. He knew a lot. The way he described sound was like it had weight. He started sending me vinyls, actual records, mailed them with notes. Never creepy, just stuff like, this helped me sleep in Porto, or play this when it rains. I didn't have a turntable. Bought one secondhand just to listen. At first, I thought he was just another lonely guy online. But he never pushed. Asked about my studies, said he respected the work I was putting in. It was subtle, the way he slipped into daily life. Every message felt like something I'd been waiting to hear. Sometimes just a song recommendation or a one-sentence travel story. Got lost outside Zagreb and ended up eating with a family of 6 who didn't speak English. That kind of stuff. I told myself I wasn't flirting, just talking. He made the world outside finals and lectures seem more alive. The age gap bothered me in theory, but in practice, he felt closer than most guys my age. We talked for a year. Never video called. He said he didn't like the way his face looked on camera. Claimed he'd been burned by social media before. I figured that was fair. He had this calm way of writing that made everything sound like a late-night radio show. When exam season came back around, I was barely hanging on. He said I should take a break, meet in person. Real music needs real air, he wrote. I said I'd think about it. He waited a few days, then asked again, said he'd be near my city. Just coffee, a walk. Nothing heavy. After 3 days of no sleep and 3 energy drinks in a row, I gave in. Gave him the address. He didn't say when he'd come. Just said, soon. The day he came, I'd almost forgotten about it. I was home, dead tired, wearing an old hoodie and waiting for my sister to get out of the shower. Then I heard it. A loud engine, low and rough. I looked out the window and saw a black motorcycle parked right in front of our house. He didn't message first. No warning. He stepped off the bike, black jeans, leather jacket, helmet under his arm. He didn't look like his profile pic. Shorter, maybe 5'7", older, definitely. Beard was patchy, and there was a deep scar across his jaw I'd never seen in any of the filtered photos he'd sent. My heart didn't race. It dropped. He walked to the door without taking off his gloves. I opened it before he could knock. Hey, I said. He didn't answer. Just leaned in, fast, like it was automatic. Tried to kiss me on the mouth. I turned my face, took a step back. He froze for a second, then laughed through his nose. Reality test, he said, like it was a joke. You pass. I didn't answer. I heard the door behind me creak. My little sister had come to see what the noise was. She was 16, still wearing pajama shorts and wet hair from the shower. She called my name. Kevin's eyes flicked past me, lit up in a way I hadn't seen before. He tilted his head, smiled wide. "Didn't know you had company," he said. I told her to go back inside. She didn't move, just stared. Then he said, "She want a ride?" He pointed his thumb toward the bike. "Bet she's never been on one of those." I laughed. Not a real laugh, just air. "She's 16. He stared at me. Long pause, no smile. "That's not what I asked." My stomach turned. "No," I said. "She's not going anywhere." He looked from me to her again, then without another word, turned and walked back to the bike. Didn't say goodbye. Just threw his leg over, started the engine. Loud again. My sister hadn't said a word. I pushed the door shut behind me and locked it. He didn't ride off immediately. Just sat there for a few seconds, engine idling, staring straight ahead. Then finally, he drove away. The next morning, it started. Not messages to me, messages about my sister. He found a way around the block. New accounts, different names, but always him. "She seems creative. That smile deserves freedom. Don't clip her wings." I didn't answer. Blocked every time. Thought it would stop. Then he found me on Facebook. My name was different there. Still, he sent a friend request with a message. "You know I care about talent. Don't waste it." I blocked him again. An hour later, the landline rang. No one calls the landline except telemarketers and our grandparents. My sister picked up, said nothing for 10 seconds, then hung up, pale. I checked the caller ID. Unknown. It rang again. I answered. He didn't say hello. Just, "You shouldn't hide the sun." I hung up. He called again with a different number. Then again. The police said it wasn't a crime to call. Unless he threatens violence or shows up physically, it's harassment, not a criminal offense. We unplugged the phone for the night. I installed a call blocker on both our mobiles, set strict privacy settings, locked every profile. Still, somehow, he slipped through. Voice messages, photo edits of her face over street art. Some spirits can't be boxed. That one stayed in my mind too long. 3 days later, a flower delivery showed up. No sender, no note at first glance. Just a clean white envelope at the bottom of the bouquet. "Don't hide her from fate." My hands shook. The flowers were wrapped in white paper, no store name, nothing traceable. I didn't show my sister. We called the police again. They took a report, said they'd file it. We asked what else we could do. They shrugged. Install a camera. Try to catch him in the act. We bought a motion-detecting door camera the next day. My sister handled the app setup. She knew how to secure things. At 16, she could have run a small IT help desk. She activated alerts, kept her phone charged. A neighbor told us they'd seen a motorcycle parked across from the house 3 nights in a row. Late. Engine off. They assumed it was someone visiting a girlfriend. We knew better. I went back to the station, filed a restraining order request. They said it would take a few days. He'd have to be served the paperwork in person. If he didn't accept, it couldn't be enforced. In the meantime, we waited. Didn't go out unless necessary. My sister stayed home from school one day after she thought she saw the helmet behind a parked van. Then, suddenly, silence. A week after the report, the motorcycle disappeared. No calls, no messages, no deliveries. I waited for something to happen. It didn't. The camera stayed on. Nothing came up except the mail carrier and a stray cat. I called the detective assigned to the case. He came to the house, sat at our kitchen table, took off his hat, looked tired. He said sometimes people like Kevin shift focus. They don't always stop, he said. Sometimes they just switch to someone else. I didn't feel relief, just a strange kind of blank. I didn't tell my sister what the detective said. She knew enough. She knew how to sweep metadata, clean up old profiles, strip XEF data from photos. We made everything private, removed ourselves from search engines, deleted old albums. She started warning her friends about who could see what online. Weeks passed. No sign of him, no bike, no flowers. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear something that sounded like a motorcycle in the distance. Could have been anyone. Still made my chest lock up. I'd pause, listen hard. Sometimes I'd check the camera feed. Empty street, blinking light. I'd go back to bed, stare at the ceiling. Social media is built to reward attention. Even the toxic kind. Likes, follows, shares, they're all just signals. Kevin understood that. He used them like tools. He knew exactly how to get in, how to be remembered. That's why I stopped posting altogether. Deleted my Instagram. My sister keeps hers, but she runs it like a fortress now. Sometimes I still hear that engine in my head. Not loud. Just enough to make me freeze, just for a second. I close my eyes, breathe deep, and wait for the sound to pass. No posts, no messages, no invitations. Just quiet. And that's how I want it to stay. It happened in 2016, a few weeks after I'd moved to a new city. I didn't know anyone, and the loneliness set in faster than I expected. I downloaded a couple of apps just to see if I could meet people, not even for dating, more like casual friends. After a few dry chats, one guy popped up. Sergey. His profile photo showed a plain-looking man with glasses, clean-shaven, with a small, closed-mouth smile. He described himself as quiet, liked books, jazz, and long walks. His messages were short, polite, nothing pushy. He used proper punctuation. That stood out, oddly. We agreed to meet at a cafe not far from my place. Midweek afternoon, public place, nothing fancy. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the window, wearing a light gray sweater and dark jeans, both ironed flat, like he'd just taken them out of packaging. He stood up halfway when he saw me, gave a small nod, and gestured to the chair across. I sat. We said the usual hellos, then silence. I asked something about what he was reading lately. He answered with the name of a Russian author I hadn't heard of, then added a single sentence describing the book. Then silence again. His eyes kept dropping to the table, like he was thinking of what to say next but couldn't get it out. He picked at his croissant like it was too big a task. Took tiny bites, chewed slowly, no crumbs. Every time I took a sip of my coffee, I could feel the silence stretch longer. He didn't seem nervous, just blank. Not smiling, not frowning. When I said I should get going, he nodded once. No protest. I stood up, thanked him, and said something like, "It was nice meeting you." Then he said, "Do you need a ride?" I smiled and shook my head. "No, I'll walk. It's close." He didn't insist. The air outside felt lighter. I adjusted my scarf and started walking back. It was maybe a 20-minute walk to my place. Cool weather, not too cold, no wind. I passed 2 intersections, turned down a quieter side street. I remember there was a bakery with yellow lights on. I was halfway down that street when I got the sensation, like someone looking at me. I slowed down and looked across the road. There he was, Sergey. Same sweater. Walking slowly on the opposite sidewalk. Not looking at a phone, not rushing. Just walking parallel. Not beside me, more like a few steps behind, but close enough that it felt off. I turned left at the next block, faster. I didn't hear steps behind me, but I didn't look back. When I got to my building, I turned around before entering the code. Empty street. No one there. I entered fast and watched the door until it shut behind me. Nothing. I didn't tell anyone. It felt too small. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was just taking a walk. I tried to forget about it. 3 days later, I was coming out of work around 6. Our office was in a business center. 2 glass towers, a parking lot, and a little lawn area where people smoked. I was halfway down the front steps when I saw him. Sergey, standing near the bicycle rack, holding a plastic bottle of water, not moving, looking around like he was waiting for someone, but no real focus. Our eyes met. He blinked slowly, like he wasn't surprised. I froze. Then he walked over. Not fast, but direct. He stopped a few feet away and tilted his head slightly. "Funny," he said. "I was just nearby." I forced a smile. "Oh." My voice cracked a bit. I nodded, like that was a normal thing. Then I stepped aside, heading toward the crosswalk. I didn't run. I didn't look back. But my head was ringing like static. A week later, I saw him again. This time at the gym. He was sitting directly across from me, stretching on a mat. I froze mid-step. I hadn't told anyone I'd joined, and I'd only signed up 2 days ago. My name wasn't visible anywhere. I turned away, pretending not to notice him, went straight to the locker room, and waited there until the room emptied out. I didn't finish my workout. I left through the side entrance. That evening, a message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. "Admiring your determination," it said. No greeting. Just that line. I blocked the number instantly. Around 2 a.m., my intercom buzzed. Not a ring, just one long buzz, then silence. I stared at it from across the room, not moving. It buzzed again. I picked it up. At first, nothing. Then, a voice whispered my name. Once, slowly, my full name. I dropped the receiver and backed away. Called the police immediately. They arrived about 15 minutes later, checked the area, walked around the building. No one was there. I asked them to check the building's front camera. They said it hadn't been working for over a month. I didn't sleep. Sat on the floor, staring at the door, phone in hand, shoes on. I waited until morning. Next few days, I started finding things on my windshield. Small folded notes tucked under the wiper. Different handwriting each time. "Why are you avoiding fate? You look tired today. Let's not pretend." No name, no threats, but unmistakably him. I saved every note, photographed everything, went to the local station, handed it all to a young officer at the desk. He took my statement, looked over the papers, nodded politely. Then he said, "Unless he speaks directly to you again or physically follows you, it's hard to get a warrant. We need a specific act of contact." I walked home tighter than a wire. That night, I turned off all lights and sat behind the curtain. Around 11 p.m., I saw him, across the street, near the lamppost. Same posture, still, looking up toward my building. I picked up my phone and filmed him, held it steady. No zoom, no filters. Just footage of a man standing in front of a residential building at night, looking up. Next morning, I returned to the station. This time I was sent to a different officer, who brought in a supervisor. They took it more seriously. Within 48 hours, I had a court date. Sergey appeared, clean-cut, silent. The judge issued a restraining order. He had to stay at least 100 yards away from me at all times. He signed the paper after the judge warned him of immediate arrest if he violated it. A week later, he was standing in line outside a pharmacy I used near my new route to work. It wasn't subtle. He looked at me, not speaking. I took 3 steps back and called the police. They responded fast. He was taken in. He was sentenced to a year probation. No contact, no proximity, mandatory check-ins, no jail time. The system's version of a compromise. I moved the same week. Different neighborhood, smaller apartment, less convenient, but quiet. I changed my email, changed my number, deactivated every account I didn't absolutely need. Now, I walk a longer route to work, but I don't mind. It's quiet, and I don't glance over my shoulder as much. I drink my coffee without checking reflections in glass. People say the risk in dating depends on how brave you are. I think it depends on distance. Bad dates happen, but nightmares, they're choices someone makes. Now, I end conversations as fast as I close my front door.